Hello friends, about of the friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be really happy if you do so. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and leave your comments. Your interaction makes the content reach everyone and contributes to the growth of the channel. Thank you. Audio journey together. The whispers about the Eastern European exclusion zone were enough to make your skin crawl. Rumors of bizarre creatures, things that sounded ripped from a sci-fi horror flick, were rampant. Some survivors described beasts straight out of folklore. Wendigos. Audio journey together. Dogmen. But I figured fear and trauma had probably twisted their perceptions. My buddy Nick, who was fluent in the local languages and had family ties to the region, his girlfriend Sarah, and I flew into the country without incident. Let's begin our audio journey together. The initial towns we passed through were deceptively normal. Picturesque farmhouses, fields bursting with crops. It looked like a postcard. But as we ventured deeper into the radiation zone, the scenery shifted dramatically. Abandoned buildings, overgrown fields, a journey together, an eerie stillness. It was like driving through a ghost land. Damn, I muttered. This place looks like it's been through hell. Pretty much, Nick replied grimly. A nuclear one. I reckon the biblical apocalypse sounds like a picket compared to what actually happens. No rapture, no divine intervention. Just fire, destruction, and long-lasting consequences. Cheery, Sarah commented, her gaze fixed on the passing landscape. I caught glimpses of small, white eyes darting into the undergrowth, vanishing as we sped past. How much further? I asked, feeling a familiar wave of car sickness. The winding roads were making my stomach churn. Still a ways, Nick said. This country's huge. Another 3, maybe 4 hours by car. Then we hike. Good thing we left at dawn, Sarah yawned, taking a swig from a neon green energy drink. The sun rose, painting the sky in shades of red and orange. The drive was uneventful, aside from my persistent nausea. I popped a couple of anti-nosy pills, wishing I'd risked bringing some edibles. Then, Nick slammed on the brakes. Holy crap, look at that. A dead bear lay sprawled across the road. It wasn't just any bear. This thing was a freak of nature. Extra paws, each with 7 clawed fingers, jutted from its limbs. Its feet were gnarled and twisted, and a pale, boneless arm protruded from its chest. As grotesque as that. Real. Sarah breathed. Sarah. Well, guess the stories are true, Nick said, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and excitement. Imagine what else is out here. This is going to be an insane documentary. Sarah, an aspiring filmmaker, was already fiddling with her camera. She got out, and after a moment, Nick and I followed. Sarah knelt by the bear, filming every gruesome detail. Then it blinked. I yelled a warning, backing away quickly. Sarah, focused on her camera, didn't notice. But Nick saw it too. He grabbed Sarah, pulling her back just as the bear's mutated paw lashed out, yearning together, claws slicing through the air where her face had been. The bear's head snapped towards us, teeth bared, saliva dripping. It roared and lunged. Just then, a pale figure darted from the forest. It was humanoid, but with distinctly porcine features, bloated, pink skin, beady red eyes. Audio journeyed together in a wide, snarling mouth filled with sharp fangs. It moved with unnatural speed, grabbing Sarah by the neck and dragging her into the woods. She let out a strangled scream. Nick yelled, taking a step forward. A massive bear paw swatted him off his feet. I stood frozen, watching Sarah disappear. The bear stood on its hind legs, roaring again, its breath reeking of decay and infection. Then it dropped back down and lumbered after the pig creature. Nick lay on the ground, clutching his bleeding leg. We gotta get help, I said. Help? He laughed. The cops aren't coming out here. We're on our own. Though we were stranded. No cell service, no way to call for help. After patching up Nick's leg with the first aid kit, we rummaged through the car for anything we could use as weapons. Damn it. This is useless, Nick said, frustration in his voice. Beer spray, a couple of knives, what's that going to do against those things? We need something serious, Daw. Wish we were back in the States, I said. You can't get guns here unless you're looting them off dead soldiers. Yeah, you're neat together. Right, he muttered, handing me a large folding knife. 1 canister of bear sprays and 3 knives and a tire iron. Not exactly an arsenal. The thought of Anna being at the mercy of those creatures made my stomach churn. Take the bear spray, Nick said, already together, shoving the canister into my hand. And I did a knife. You ready for this? Hell no. I replied. We should try to find help. If we both get killed, no one will find Anna. The nearest town is 2 hours west, he argued, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. By the time we get back with help, her trail will be cold. We have to go now. If you don't want to come, I'm coming, I said grimly. Nick had a dark past. He'd been kidnapped as a kid, held captive by a deranged neighbor, left to starve in a pit. Our creative audio journey together. The memory of his stories fueled his determination to find Anna. The bear and the pig creature had left a clear trail. We moved cautiously, scanning our surroundings. Then, the trees opened into a clearing. It was a horrifying sight. A field littered with human skeletons, arranged in a macabre semicircle. Some were mostly intact, others scattered by scavengers. It looked like a bone orchard. What the hell? I whispered. Dead bodies, Nick said flatly. From the accident? I asked. He shook his head, pointing to some fresher corpses. Their throats were ripped out, deep bite marks visible on the bones. One skeleton clutched a glass bottle containing a rolled up piece of paper. I carefully pried the bottle from the skeletal fingers, uncorked it, and pulled out the paper. It was thick, like handmade parchment. It was begin our audio journey together. The writing was in elegant cursive, like it had been written with a quill. I read aloud, rules to survive in the Helskin Nature Preserve of 1. The cult known as the Golden Butchers kidnaps women to breed them with the pig creatures. They worship the offspring as gods. If someone is taken, begin audio journey together. They're held at the living farm at the forest's edge. 2. If you encounter Mr. Welcome, the enormous pig god with eyes on his forehead, do not let him touch you. 3. The red snakes can only see movement. If you see them, stay perfectly still. Don't even breathe. Breeding women with pig creatures. Nick exclaimed, his face pale. We have to find her. But where do we even start? A scream echoed through the hills, coming from our left. It sounded like Anna. Nick's expression hardened. Without a word, audio journey together. He took off running. Wait up, I yelled, sprinting after him. We spent hours searching, the forest a maze of trees and undergrowth. We never heard another scream. We were both starting to fear we were going in the wrong direction. A narrow deer trail wound through the brush, leading up rocky hills and alongside clear streams. We followed it, sweating and anxious. How do you even know we're going the right way? I asked, finally breaking the silence. We've been on this trail for hours. It's the direction the scream came from, Nick said, audio journey together, his voice strained. Where else would they go? They'd take the easiest route. As we reached a mountain peak, I checked the gauger counter. The radiation levels were dangerously high. We couldn't stay here much longer. Just then, a distorted shriek echoed from below. It sounded almost electronic, amplified to an ear-splitting volume. Distant roars answered from the surrounding woods, much closer this time. Peace est, a voice whispered from a thick patch of ferns to my left. Hey, you. I jumped, drawing my knife. Nick raised the tire iron, ready to strike. A small boy crawled out of the ferns. He was painfully thin, his face covered in dirt, his dark eyes sunken. He couldn't have been older than 10, but he looked much older. His ragged clothes barely covered him. Don't kill me, please, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Take me away from here. My parents brought me here. They were part of the Golden Butchers, but they got sick and died. Who are you, kid? Are you kid? Nick asked, pulling him to his feet. My name is Ely. I'm from the farm, he said, pointing towards the tallest peak in the area. You can't see it from here. Gather. Can you take us there? Nick asked. Ella's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. "If you take me with you when you leave, I'll show you," he said, sobbing. "But it's a terrible place. It's the place of Miss Welcome." Ella led us to the living farm. He navigated the forest with surprising skill, following subtle signs I wouldn't have noticed. He saved us a lot of time. "There," he said, pointing through the trees. The top of the hill had been cleared. In its place stood a horrifying structure. The upper part of the building, which peeked over the trees, had something like a bell tower. But instead of a bell, there was an enormous, bloodshot eye. The eye's iris was crimson, its pupil dilated. It was huge, the size of a church bell, and it had no eyelids. Strange white filaments, like mold, trailed down from it into the building. The rest of the building was black, windowless, and imposing. It had a brutalist architecture, all sharp angles and steep slopes. The eye constantly rotated, scanning the surrounding hills. The building itself seemed to breathe. "Welcome," a distorted voice echoed from the walls. "Welcome, Wella, come." "What the hell is this, kid?" Nick whispered. "Where's Anna?" Ellie shook his head. "She's inside with the other breeders," he said, fear in his voice. Keep them chained up until the ritual." "What was that?" I asked. The light was coming. "Night." "Sunset," he replied. "Sunset. That's almost now. We have to go." Nick exclaimed. "What are you going to do? Stab that building journey to your knife?" I whispered. "We need a plan." The building roared, its scream echoing through the hills. It was answered by other roars, one coming from just behind us. I grabbed Nick's shoulder, my eyes wide. The brush cracked under a heavy weight. Journey together, a monstrous pig emerged, walking on all fours. It was the size of an SUV. Its eyes were like the eye on the building, blood, red and dilated. Hundreds of sharp teeth protruded from its skin, covering its pink flesh like tumors. It roared and charged. Its mouth opened and closed, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Run," I yelled, grabbing Ellie and pulling him along. We sprinted towards the building. It had a single wide-open barn door. The creature's heavy footsteps grew closer. "In the barn," I yelled. It was our only option. We ran inside, guarding together, slamming the doors shut just as the creature reached them. We shoved a large board into the brackets, locking the doors from the inside. It was cool and dark inside. I turned and almost screamed. Hundreds of imprisoned women, the walls of the barn, stacked in makeshift cells, party together. They stared down at us with hollow eyes. Most were young, but they looked ancient. Along the back wall stood an enormous pig, positioned like Jesus on the cross. It was as tall as the barn itself. Dozens of extra eyes covered its face. White filaments rose from the top of its head, connecting to the eye in the bell tower. Its many red eyes fixed on us. "Welcome," it hissed. "Welcome." Its limbs were chained to the wall. This was Mr. Welcome. "Ina," Nick yelled, frantically searching the faces. "Don't scream," Ely whispered. "Please, don't scream. Too late." Trapdoors in the floor sprung open. Mutated bears and pig creatures emerged, their eyes filled with hunger. "Shit," Nick yelled, running back to the door. We pulled the board free. The barn door flew open. Outside, it was night. Audio journeyed together. Snakes the size of track trailers slithered into the clearing, their eyes glowing red. Standing in front of the barn, I felt a sense of impending doom. I looked at Ali, who gave me a faint, terrified smile. "I think we're screwed," Nick whispered. Then I remembered the rules. "Stay still," I said. "Don't even breathe." The predators from the barn were closing in, but the snakes were closer. As the bears and pig creatures prepared to pounce, I closed my eyes. I felt a rush of air. The snakes moved in a blur, their massive jaws opening, fangs extending. Keeping my eyes closed, I listened to the sounds of tearing flesh and screaming animals. Then silence. After a long, tense moment, someone touched my shoulder. I opened my eyes. Nick stared at me. "They're all gone," he whispered. "Except Mr. Welcome. It's an audio journey. It's now or never." We moved back into the barn. The trapdoors were still open. We heard faint sobbing from below. We went down to the basement. It was a dark, hay-covered room. Torture devices lined the walls. In the corner, we found Anna tied up. She was a mess. "Oh my God. You came," she whispered. "Get me out of here. They're coming. The ritual's about to start." We cut her free. "We have to be quiet," I said. As we went back upstairs, Mr. Welcome's voice changed. "Welcome, thieves," he hissed, his voice turning demonic. "She is mine. You will pay." He inhaled deeply, his body swelling. He ripped the chains from the wall, pus and blood dripping from the holes. He moved towards us, walking on two legs. The optic nerves connecting him to the eye in the tower snapped. Nick looked at me, sadness in his eyes. "Jet out," he whispered. "I'll distract him. Just get Anna home." He ran towards the monster, raising his small knife. Mr. Welcome tried to swipe at him, but Nick ducked and ran behind him. He stabbed the creature in the leg. It probably didn't do much damage. Begin our creative audio journey together, but it was a distraction. Mr. Welcome turned, dropping to all fours. He smacked Nick with his snout, sending him flying. Nick hit the wall with a sickening thud. His skin immediately started to blacken, as if he were being burned alive. His eyes melted. He tried to crawl back to us as he died. Cruddy journey together. "Run," I screamed, grabbing Anna's hand. Ely was already ahead of us. I heard the ground shake as Mr. Welcome gave chase. He was too fast. We wouldn't make it. "Keep going," I yelled at Anna and Ayla. They kept running. I turned to face Mr. Welcome. Journey together. I don't know if it was luck or some kind of divine intervention, but the beer spray was our only chance. With Mr. Welcome running on all fours, his face was within reach. I raised the canister and sprayed a concentrated blast into his many eyes. He didn't stop immediately. Audio journey together, and I had to jump out of the way to avoid being trampled. The air rushed past me like a speeding train. Then Mr. Welcome roared. A roar of pain and confusion. Blinded, he stumbled, crashing into the walls and knocking down support beams. The barn shook. Audio journey together. The forest outside echoed with the sound of his rampage. Without hesitation, I turned and ran after Anna and Ely. We burst out of the barn and sprinted towards the car. I didn't look back. We didn't stop running until we were miles away. We told the police about the barn and the women, a big gate of our journey, but they couldn't find it. It was like it had vanished. We never heard anything about it again. Looking back, I understand why Chernobyl is a restricted zone. It's not just the radiation. There are things that hide in the shadows, things that thrive in the darkness, things that should never be seen. All right. So, when I was a kid, me and my best friend, Chloe, were super into urban exploration. Sneaking into abandoned buildings, creeping around forgotten places, that kind of stuff. Chloe, she was the expert. She knew all the coolest spots and all the rules to keep us safe. Together, some were obvious, like wear sneakers and tall socks, and clothes as you could actually move in. Bring a flashlight and water, duh. But some of her rules, they were more out there. Stuff she'd learned the hard way, I guess. This one time, I really should have listened to her, but spoiler alert, I didn't. Chloe, she's still one of the smartest people I've ever met, which is probably why she was so good at this urban exploration thing. She was fearless, but not in a stupid way, and I trusted her completely. Usually, begin our creative audio journey together. We'd explored an abandoned Macy's that was beyond creepy, some old barn way out in the sticks, and a bunch of places we just found driving around. After a while, Chloe told me about this special place she wanted to show me. She wouldn't tell me anything about it, which was weird, but it just made me more excited. I remember the first time we went there like it was yesterday. It was late summer, the time when the leaves haven't started turning yet, but you can feel that little chill in the air that says it's coming. Audio journey together. One of the things I loved about exploring with Chloe was that she always drove. I got to chill in the passenger seat and watch the world go by. That day, we drove out into the hills outside of town, past all the cookie cutter houses, then some farms, our creative audio journey together, then just fields and trees as far as you could see. I memorized the way we went, like some part of me knew I'd want to come back. I wish I wasn't so good at remembering stuff like that. We'd grabbed coffee before we left town, and we were just laughing and singing along to the radio, audio journey there, having a blast. After driving for ages, Chloe pulled over on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. Seriously, there was nothing around, no landmarks, nothing. She just grinned and said, "We're here." I got out of the car and took a deep breath. It smelled amazing, tall grass, old Joe trees, and that kind of damp, woodsy smell. I looked around at the huge pine trees and the pretty aspens, then back at Chloe. "Okay," I said. "I don't know if this counts as urban exploration, but it's pretty." Chloe smirked and tossed her crazy, curly brown hair. "Guess not," she said. "But you're gonna love this." I followed her into the woods. There was no path, and I was pretty sure there never had been. It felt like no one had ever been out here before us. I had this quick flash of being in one of those Slenderman stories. You know, the ones where a friend snaps and sacrifices you in the woods. But I pushed that scary thought away. We hiked for a few minutes, over fallen trees and through tall grass. I even saw an old wagon, like a covered wagon just completely overgrown with weeds. It was wild. Then, through the trees, I saw it. A building. Chloe pointed, all excited. "There it is." There, tucked away past a little river, was this tiny, perfect Victorian house. It looked like a dollhouse, but like a big one. It had been painted pink and blue, with white trim around the windows, but the paint was all peeling and faded. My inner kid went nuts. I was in love. "What is it?" I whispered, like I was in a church or something. Chloe had this huge, satisfied smile on her face, the one she got when we found something really cool. "It's an old playhouse," she whispered back. "Audio together. I bet some rich dude built it for his daughters like 100 years ago. It's beautiful, right? But also kind of creepy." I nodded. It was beautiful, but creepy too. It was like, if I looked long enough, I'd see a little girl run out from behind it, or her kids playing. Our journey together. It was at least 2 stories tall, and it was made of wood and stone, not plastic like the ones you see now. The roof was caving in, and most of the windows were broken. I was totally hooked. I started walking towards it, figuring Chloe would know the best way to get across the river, but she grabbed my arm hard. "No," she said, and that one word made my stomach drop. "Fuo, what do you mean no?" I laughed, pulling my arm back. "We drove all the way out here, and you don't even want to check it out." Chloe shook her head, and her face was serious, which was not her usual vibe. "We can look at it from here," she said, "but we're not going over there." I started to get annoyed. "We can just wade across the river," I said. "It looks shallow. Audio journey together. I promise I'll stand by your car until I'm dry if you're worried about your precious seats." Chloe was a neat freak about her car, and she always kept a towel in the trunk, after we learned that lesson the hard way. She let go of my arm but took a step back. Journey together. She was distancing herself from me or the playhouse or both. "Mara," she said, using my full name, which she only ever did when she was serious. "Look around. Do you see any beer bottles, cigarettes, soda cans, candy wrappers, anything?" I looked around, scanning the ground. She was right to get. There was nothing. "No," I admitted. "I guess whoever owns this land takes good care of it." "Nobody owns it, as far as I can tell," Chloe said. "Nobody takes care of it. People just don't stay here long. If teenagers won't even party here, audio journey area, then we definitely shouldn't be messing around. There's a reason no one goes near that thing. We can admire it from a distance, but we are not crossing that river. Just trust me, okay?" But I couldn't. I mean, I usually trusted Chloe with my life, and she'd never steered me wrong before. But this time, I just didn't get it. Why was she being so weird about this amazing little house? We stood there arguing for a few more minutes. Finally, Chloe, who I swear is the most stubborn person ever, threatened to leave me there if I took one more step toward the playhouse. So, of course, audio journey together. I took another step, because apparently I am also stubborn. She immediately turned around and started marching back to the car. She wasn't playing. I was kidding. I yelled, chasing after her. I'm kidding. She didn't stop walking until we got back to the car. I could tell she wasn't really mad, but she was definitely serious. We brushed ourselves off, did a quick tick check, another one of those, learned the hard way, rules, and got back in the car. We ended up going to the mall, of all places. RDO together, it was like she wanted to be around as many people as possible after being out in the middle of nowhere. Later, when Chloe dropped me off at my house, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "I was serious, Mara. If there's no sign of people, especially teenagers, around a place that's obviously man-made, that's a huge red flag. That's a sign you need to be careful." I smiled, but I couldn't quite meet her eyes. Yeah, I know, I said. I got it. I could tell she still felt uneasy about it, but she went home anyway. And me, creative audio journey together. I couldn't stop thinking about that playhouse. I'd taken a few pictures with my phone, and I spent the next few weeks staring at them. I'd zoom in and out, studying every detail, like I was going to be tested on it. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. One Saturday, let's begin our creative audio journey together. When it was still warm enough that you could pretend fall wasn't just around the corner, I got in my car and drove back out there. I was going to explore that playhouse, with or without Chloe. Mostly because she would actually kill me if she knew I was going alone. Creative audio journey together. It was a lot harder to find the place alone. I had to drive back and forth on that same stretch of road for a while, second-guessing myself, before I finally found the spot where I thought we'd parked. It was mid-afternoon, and the first thing I noticed when I got out of my car was the quiet. Like, too quiet. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, no bugs buzzing. Nothing. I couldn't remember if it had been this quiet when I was here with Chloe, but that unsettling feeling started creeping up on me again. I pushed it down. I started walking through the tall grass and brush, just like we had before. I tried to remember the way, looking for landmarks, but everything looked different alone. I kept going, telling myself I was being silly. Finally, after what felt like forever, I saw the playhouse in the distance. RDAO journey together. I'd imagined this moment a bunch of times in the days leading up to this. I thought I'd feel excited, maybe a little triumphant. Instead, I just felt uneasy. Storm clouds were gathering overhead, making the whole place feel darker, gloomier. Begin our creative audio journey together. I told myself it was just the weather messing with my head and kept walking. When I got to the river, I walked up and down the bank for a bit, looking for a way across. There was no bridge, no stepping stones, nothing. Just like Chloe said, it was like nobody ever came out here. And a voice in my head, Chloe's voice, whispered, "If teenagers won't party here." I scoffed to myself. Maybe that makes it the perfect place to be, for once Chloe didn't know everything. After a few minutes of searching, I found a fallen log that stretched most of the way across. It wasn't easy to gill, but it would have to do. I carefully started inching my way across, holding my arms out for balance. At one point, the log wobbled and I almost fell. My heart was pounding, even though the water below was shallow. Our creative journey together. I told myself it was just because I didn't want to get my shoes wet or have to wash the stupid car towel Chloe had made me buy. But another, smaller voice in my head was screaming at me to turn back. Finally, I made it to the other side. I was standing right in front of the playhouse. Audio journey together. And honestly, it was worth it. Even with the peeling paint, the broken windows, and the sagging roof, it was still beautiful, in a haunting kind of way. It really did look like a giant dollhouse. I just stood there for a long time, taking it all in. It felt like hours, RDO journey together, but it was probably only minutes. I took another picture, trying to get the whole thing in the frame, and tried to send it to Chloe. But there was no service, of course. Then, I did something I knew I would regret, but I did it anyway. I took a deep breath and went inside. The first thing I noticed inside was the floor. It was just plain wood, and it was surprisingly clean. I mean, there was some dirt and leaves that had probably blown in, but that was it. No trash, no graffiti, nothing. If you've ever been inside an abandoned building, you know that's weird. Like, really weird. I looked up and saw a small, square opening in the ceiling with a rope ladder dangling down. The rope was frayed and old. Definitely not safe to climb. Part of me felt kind of proud. Even though I hadn't listened to Chloe about not coming here, creative audio journey together, I was still using her safety tips. I figured maybe, just maybe, if this all went well, I could convince her to come back with me. She had to see this place for herself. I took a few more pictures from inside, trying to get good shots of the walls, the ceiling, the light coming through the broken windows. It was all so picturesque, in a decaying kind of way. Then, in a pile of leaves in the corner, I saw something that made me catch my breath. It was a tiny teacup, like from a child's tea set. It was made of porcelain, audio together, painted with delicate little flowers, and it was perfectly intact. I walked over to it, feeling like I was in a dream. The closer I got, the more I saw. There was a whole tea set scattered amongst the leaves, like someone had been playing there and just left. And next to the tea set, half hidden by shadows, I noticed something else. Wooden slats nailed to the wall, leading up to another square hole in the ceiling. Another floor. This playhouse just kept getting more and more interesting. I tested the slats. We begin our creative audio journey together, pushing down on one with my foot while I braced myself against the wall. When I told Chloe about this later, she pointed out that I should have tested it with my hand, or better yet a stick, in case the wood gave way and the wall collapsed. She's got a point, but also, when is Chloe ever wrong? The slats seemed sturdy enough, so, naturally, I started to climb. When I pulled myself up into the second floor room, I nearly fell back down in shock. Propped up in the corner like it was waiting for me was a life-size doll. It was a man doll, audio journey together, with a cloth-bodied porcelain head and hands. The face was wrong. It looked angry, with these painted-on eyebrows and bright pink lips pulled down in a frown. But the eyes, they looked almost scared. It was the most unsettling thing I'd ever seen, and let's begin our creative journey together. I had to hang onto the wooden slats for a minute, just trying to catch my breath and calm down. Then I remembered I was hanging several feet above the ground on rotting wood, so I scrambled the rest of the way into the room. This room was smaller than the one below, maybe 6 feet across, audio journey together. And unlike the first floor, this one was a mess. There were scraps of what looked like fancy little girls' dresses scattered around, and pieces of the roof, like shingles and boards, all over the floor. I couldn't tell how old the playhouse was, but it had clearly been through a lot of storms, our creative audio journey together. When I looked up, I could see straight through the roof in places, just sky and trees. I looked back down at the floor, and that little snake of worry started wriggling in my stomach again. If teenagers won't party here, then we shouldn't explore either. I tried to push the thought away, audio journey together, kicking at the debris on the floor. I wanted to see what was underneath, like maybe there were more toys, or clues, or something. As I moved a broken piece of wood, a little girl's face, smiling up at me, was revealed from beneath the rubble, and I screamed. It was another doll, smaller than the man doll, but just as creepy. I stumbled backward, tripped, and landed right in the lap of the life-sized man doll. Its arms flopped forward, like it was hugging me, and I screamed even louder. Then I just started sobbing, partly from fear, partly from relief that it was just a doll. At least, I thought it was just a doll. I crawled away, putting as much distance as possible between me and the creepy doll couple, and just lay there on the floor, a jumble of emotions. After a while, I felt something touch my ankle. Audio journey together. It was a soft touch so light I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. But then my stupid brain decided to look. My eyes traveled down my leg to my foot, and there it was. A tiny hand, resting gently on my ankle. My gaze slowly followed the tiny hand up to a delicate wrist, a slender arm. and finally to a small, smiling face. I stared, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. Sitting there, amidst the rubble, was a little girl. Not a doll, a real little girl, though she was small, like the size of a toddler. Her skin was pale and smooth, like porcelain, but it moved like real skin. Her hair was jet black, and her eyes were a bright, unsettling blue. They were shiny like glass. She stroked my ankle gently, almost affectionately, and asked in a voice that sounded like tinkling bells, audio together, "Do you want to be my friend?" I don't know how else to describe. Her voice sounded like porcelain, too delicate, bright, and just off. I jerked my ankle away and scrambled backward, like a crab, trying to escape a predator. As soon as I moved, her smile faded. For a split second, I felt like the worst person in the world. I just want to go, I stammered, my voice trembling. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here." Tears welled up in her big blue eyes. "You don't want to play with me?" she asked, her voice thick with sadness. I was completely frozen. On the one hand, audio journey together. A tiny, porcelain-looking girl had just crawled out of a pile of rubble in a creepy, abandoned playhouse in the middle of nowhere, and was acting like we were long-lost friends. On the other hand, she just wanted someone to play with, and I felt like a total monster for saying no. Creative audio journey together. I also felt like a complete idiot for feeling bad instead of running for my life. I edged back a little further, and she asked, "Are you scared of me?" She slowly started to pull herself out of the rubble, revealing a body that matched her doll-like face. She was wearing a frilly pink, white, together, and blue dress that, weirdly, looked brand new. Instead of crawling towards me, she stood up, walked over to the life-sized man doll, and gently touched its cheek. The doll's eyes flew open, and for a horrifying second, I saw real human eyes behind the painted porcelain ones. I screamed, a raw, the primal sound. The doll's porcelain mouth opened, as if it were screaming too. The girl quickly pulled her hand away, and the doll's face went back to its creepy, painted-on expression. "Daddy was always scared of me, too," she said softly. That was it. That was the final straw. Together, I scrambled to the hole in the floor, not caring about the rope ladder or the fall, and practically threw myself down. I used the frayed rope to slow my descent, getting some nasty rope burn in the process. I landed hard on the ground floor, stumbling and falling. From above, I heard that tiny, porcelain voice say, "Don't run away. I'll have to make Daddy chase you." I didn't stick around to find out if she was serious. I ran. I sprinted out of the playhouse, across the log, over the river, not stopping until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. I fumbled it once, twice, before finally managing to unlock the door. I threw myself inside and locked it behind me, sobbing with terror and relief. I looked up, half expecting to see the little girl standing there, our creative audio journey together. But instead I saw her holding the hand of the life-sized doll, its head lolled to the side like a broken toy. I threw the car into reverse and backed out onto the road, not caring if I hit anything. I drove all the way home before I realized my phone was gone. Audio journey together. It must have fallen out of my pocket when I was running. It was only a couple of hours later that Chloe showed up at my house, looking pale and furious. She hugged me tight, then pulled back and said, "What the hell, Mara? You went back there without me." I burst into tears all over again, and it took me a while to calm down enough to tell her everything. When I was done, she just stared at me. "Honestly," she said, "I don't think I'd believe any of that if you didn't look like you were about to have a heart attack. Did you take anything before you went out there?" I shook my head. I was stone cold, sober. "Chloe, I swear." She nodded slowly, her eyes distant. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at it, then held it up to show me. The message was from my number, my missing phone. I watched as she opened it. Audio journey together. It was a picture of my car, speeding away from the playhouse. And in the distance, just visible through the trees, was a tiny figure in a pink, white, and blue dress, holding the hand of a much larger, darker figure. I never went back to that playhouse, obviously. I don't even drive that way anymore. And to this day, when it's very quiet, I sometimes think I hear a high-pitched, sweet voice asking, "Do you want to be my friend?" A few years back, I realized I needed a serious life change. Everything seemed to be spiraling downwards: my finances, my mental state, my whole life. I'd go weeks without decent sleep, the city noise a constant hum below. Every time I stepped outside, let's begin our Creo journey together, it felt like things were getting: homeless people, discarded needles and pipes, more violence, overdoses, death. The city had become a wasteland, and I knew I had to get out. I was alone. No girlfriend, no wife, no kids. My parents had passed a few years prior, together, and I barely kept in touch with my siblings. Nothing tied me to that place, a place where I felt like I was slowly dying inside. So, I sold almost everything I owned, packed my car, and drove north to Alaska, hoping for a fresh start. I bought a small cabin in a plot of land nestled in the majestic mountains and dark, enchanting forests. In winter, the northern lights danced across the sky, a breathtaking display of cosmic light. The move did bring some peace, initially, but eventually, I realized the problem wasn't my location, it was me. As they say, wherever you go, there you are. I lived in that cabin for 3 months without any major incidents, aside from the ever-present threat of bears, moose, and wolves. I had a rifle and a shotgun for hunting, a small garden out back, and a solar panel for electricity. This is the life, I'd say, relaxing in a hammock strung up on the porch, gazing at the incredible view. Snow-capped mountains loomed against the dense evergreens, a pristine blanket of white covering everything. Not another house or road in sight. No work, no stress, no pollution, no constant traffic. I'd close my eyes, breathing in the crisp air. I often fell asleep out there, waking up just as the sun began to set, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and reds. One evening, I woke up and stumbled inside to make some instant coffee. As I sipped it, I browsed through the few things the previous owner had left behind. Among them was a bookshelf filled with sci-fi classics, while flipping past titles like A Maze of Death and You Bake, a black, leather-bound book caught my eye. It had no title or author, the cover worn and faded. Curious, I pulled it out and opened it. The pages were filled with neat, cursive handwriting. It was a diary. The first entry was dated January 9th, 2015. It read, "I don't know if I'm losing my mind. Let's begin our creative audio journey together. I went into town to see my therapist yesterday, and she just keeps saying it's all in my head. But I know it's not. When I first moved into this cabin, it felt like paradise. I never imagined something would be lurking around at night. I never thought it would be hiding under my bed. Audio journey together, peering in the windows, following me like a shadow. Right now, I'm snowed in, coffee in one hand, my pistol in the other. I can't sleep. I keep hearing something shuffling under the bed. Sometimes I hear ragged breathing, like a corpse with dirt in its lungs. Party together. I've caught glimpses of it in the dark. Whatever it is, its skin hangs loose, almost falling off the bone. It looks like a naked, emaciated man. Its eyes are dark and rotten, its back hunched, spine twisted. It moves in this slow, jerky way, but I can never get a clear look. It's like its body is broken, out of joint. Its legs seem to bend the wrong way sometimes. By the time I turn on the lights or try to record it, it's gone. But the smell lingers. A sickly sweet, decaying odor. I don't know what it wants. I want to leave, but with the storm outside, I'm stuck. The snowdrifts are 5 feet high. I feel like I'm trapped in a cage with a rabid animal, waiting for it to strike. My wife says she hasn't seen or heard anything, but she keeps disappearing. Last night, she vanished in the middle of a blizzard. Where did she go? Creative audio journey together. I asked her in the morning, but she said she'd been here the whole time. She didn't remember anything. There's no way she went to town. There wasn't time, and the trails are impassable. Something's happening here. I'm terrified for our lives. I slammed the diary shut, out of air, not wanting to read any more. I didn't want to get caught up in someone else's paranoia. If the previous owner had cracked up in the wilderness and started hallucinating things, I didn't need to know the details. I shoved the diary back on the shelf, grabbing a maze of death. Instead, together, I tried to push the image of the twisted, naked man from my mind, but it stuck with me. I eventually fell asleep just before dawn. But as I drifted off, I thought I saw a silhouette in the window, a gaunt figure with dark, sunken eyes staring back. I thought I saw Long, him and Hugh of audio journey together and compress against the glass. I blinked, sat up, and looked out into the snowy landscape. There was nothing there. Another hunter occasionally used the deer trails near my cabin. There was a frozen lake about a quarter-mile down the hill, audio journey together. A solid sheet of white under thick blankets of snow. I decided to take a hike in the frigid morning air. I bundled up in my warmest gear, strapped on my snowshoes, and grabbed my shotgun. Habit I'd picked up since moving to the Alaskan wilderness. Audio journey together. You never knew what you might run into out here. I stepped outside and immediately noticed footprints in the snow around the cabin. At first, a chill ran down my spine. I thought of the silhouette I'd seen in the window the night before, the nightmarish figure from the diary, together. But these tracks didn't lead to the window. They followed the trail about 20 feet away, then veered off towards the frozen lake. I followed their path with my eyes and saw a dark figure moving slowly across the ice. "Cale," I shouted, recognizing my closest neighbor, journey together. He had a cabin about a mile away. He jumped at the sound of my voice, startled. His dark snow pants and heavy fur coat rustled as he turned, raising his rifle instinctively. When he saw it was me, he lowered the gun and gave a wave. "Ethan, didn't expect to see you out this early," he called back, his voice echoing in the still, snow-covered landscape. The snow always seemed to absorb sound, making everything feel hushed and muffled. "Yeah, haven't been sleeping well," I replied, shifting my shotgun on my shoulder. "What are you doing out here?" "Just doing a little hunting," he said with a quick wink. "Animals are most active around dawn and dusk. That's when I have the best luck." He walked over to me, looking me in the eye. "You look rough, man. Let's begin our creative audio journey together. You got bags under your eyes big enough to carry groceries. Tell me about it," I muttered. "Hey, this might sound a little strange, but did you know the guy who owned this place before me?" Caleb's expression changed. His friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by a guarded look, an audio journey together. "Yeah, I knew him," he said shortly. He seemed to be studying my face as if trying to read my thoughts. His sudden shift in attitude made me uneasy. "Is he still around?" I asked hesitantly. Caleb's frown deepened. "Look, Ethan, I don't know what this is about, audio journey together, but he's dead. He died in that cabin," he said, pointing back towards my place. My stomach dropped. A cold wave of dread washed over me. "How? What happened? Was it a heart attack or something?" I stammered. Caleb looked down at the snow, avoiding my gaze. "You know, Alaska has the highest missing persons rate in the whole country, right? It's crazy. They even have a name for it, the Alaska Triangle," he said. "And we're right smack in the middle of it." I just stared at him, confused. It felt like he was deliberately avoiding my question. "No, I didn't know that," I replied. Caleb nodded slowly, then looked back up at me. He took a deep breath. "Look," he said, "what happened to the last owner and his wife? It's a messed up story, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. I'll tell you really, but I'm telling you now, it's not going to help you sleep any better." "I need to know," I insisted. The wind had picked up again, whipping snowflakes around us. "All right," Caleb sighed. "Let's head back to your cabin. I could use a shot of whiskey to warm up." We settled into my cabin with a bottle of Johnny Walker and 2 shot glasses. I wasn't much of a drinker, but Caleb certainly was. He downed 3 shots in quick succession. I took a small sip of mine. Audio journey together, setting the glass back down on the coffee table with a clink. Caleb hissing through his teeth. Ah, that's the good stuff, he said, thumping his chest. He looked at me, a strange light in his eyes. So, you want to know about what happened to Will Tanner? Well, the truth is, nobody really knows the whole story. I used to see him every now and then. We'd have a drink, chat. We all know each other out here. I nodded, urging him to continue. He seemed like a normal, decent guy. Reminded me a bit of you, actually. A young guy trying to escape the rat race dog. He was here for maybe a couple months, I don't know exactly. Everything seemed fine. We'd go target shooting sometimes, have a beer. We'd get together with a few other hunters who lived closer to town, play some poker. I never saw anything odd about Will. Never could have predicted what happened. He sighed, looking out the window at the mountains with a faraway expression. Well, what did happen? I pressed. He started talking about seeing someone outside his window at night. Hearing noises under his bed, like heavy breathing and shuffling. He started leaving all the lights on, 24/7. Caleb leaned closer, a flicker of fear in his eyes. He started losing it. Started digging holes all over the property, looking for something. Our creative audio journey together in the middle of snowstorms, I'd see him out there, digging. He never seemed to sleep. Classic cabin fever. A few weeks later, I got worried. I hadn't heard from him in a few days, which was unusual. I came over here and found the door wide open, audio journey together. Will was sitting in that chair you're in now, a shotgun at his feet, a bullet hole through his head. My breath caught in my throat. And next to him, Caleb continued. I found a blood-stained diary, open to the middle. The last entry had blood spatter on it, but you could still read it. It was just a few sentences. I glanced over at the bookshelf where I'd found the diary. It said something like, "You see now, the twisted man is showing me the truth. Today I'll finally find it." That was a suicide note. I asked, my hearty-o jar pounding. He nodded. Yeah, I called the Rangers. They brought in the cops, CSI. They took everything against evidence, including the diary, he said. Good riddance, I say. Reading stuff like that can mess with your head. Delusions can spread, you know. I did know. Creative audio journey together. But I didn't say anything. I looked back at the diary, its black leather cover gleaming like a dark omen. If the police took the diary, how did it get back here? You said he had a wife living here with him, I asked. Yeah, she went missing around the same time, Caleb said. Audio journey together, real strange. The cops thought she'd just left, but he shook his head grimly. She was never seen again, vanished into thin air. But after Caleb left, I walked stiffly over to the bookshelf and took down the diary. I flipped through the pages until I found the last entry. Darkened bloodstains were scattered across the page. I found the final note and read the data, January 27th, 2015. Will Tanner hadn't lasted long after he started seeing the twisted man. I wondered if my fate would be the same. The sun began to set. I sat at the small kitchen table, begin our creative audio journey together, eating some leftover venison stew and rice, reading through the diary. Towards the end, Will had written that the twisted man wasn't trying to hurt him. He believed the creature was trying to protect him from something, a greater evil. I scoffed, a surge of anger rising in me, audio journey together. His naivety had gotten him killed. But then a thought struck me, what if I was making the same mistake? Maybe I should just grab my things and leave. I could take the snowmobile to town in a couple of hours. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't. Something about this mystery drew me in. Like a siren's call, my curiosity kept me rooted there. I needed answers, and I would find them. I'd fallen asleep in front of the TV, an empty beer bottle in my hand. The TV, hooked up to a satellite dish, and no cable or phone lines out here, flickered with static. Our rave audio journey together. All my power came from solar energy, which was usually enough. But tonight, I needed the noise, the mindless flashing lights. It kept the creeping dread at bay. I woke with a jolt. The TV screen was a blizzard of white noise. The hissing deepened into a gurgle, and for a second, our creative audio journey together. I thought I heard faint words, ragged breathing, like a drowning man's last gasp. A black line crawled across the screen, and an image materialized. The cabin was plunged into silence, save for the howling wind outside. It looked like a live camera feed of a room. My cabin, a journey together. I saw myself in the chair staring at the screen. I raised my hand and the miniature version of me on the screen did the same. Ice water seemed to run through my veins. What the hell? I whispered, looking around for the camera. There was nothing there, just the wooden ceiling. Audio journey together. I turned back to the screen and nearly screamed. The TV now showed a pale, naked man crouching behind my chair. With jerky movements, he rose, his spine twisted and contorted. A hissing voice came from the speakers, as if the speaker itself had dirt and maggots in its throat. He is a killer. The shadow of death. It gurgled. Many have fallen. Many lie buried in this forest. You will be next. He is watching you. Long, broken fingers with blackened nails reached out to my shoulders on the screen. I jumped up, stumbling backward, spinning around in terror. Audio journey together. My back slammed into the TV, sending it crashing to the floor. In the brief moment before darkness engulfed me, I thought I saw a pale, sunken face with rotting eyes peering from behind the chair. I turned on every light in the cabin. The twisted man was gone. Let's begin our audio journey together. But I knew I couldn't stay there. The warning echoed in my mind. If the creature wanted to kill me, why hadn't it done so already? It didn't make sense. Who was watching me? And why warn me? Maybe it was some kind of twisted game. I threw on my snow gear, grabbing my shotgun. Let's begin our creative audio journey. I had to get to Caleb's cabin, but fate had other plans. I felt eyes on me as I drove along the narrow deer trail. The branches of the evergreens clothed my clothes. More than once, I thought I saw a pale figure standing in the snow, but it was always gone when I looked again. Relief washed over me when I saw Caleb's cabin in the distance. I pulled up outside and saw 2 sets of footprints in the snow. One much smaller than the other. I found it odd, but dismissed it. I knocked on the door. Caleb answered, looking groggy and half-dressed. His face creased into a frown when he saw me. "Caleb, I need a favor," I said quickly. "Something weird is happening at my cabin. Can I stay here until morning? I can't stay there tonight." He nodded, yawning and gesturing me inside. "You can crash on the couch," he mumbled, pointing to a worn-out sofa. He stumbled back towards his bedroom, closing the door behind him. I couldn't sleep. I wandered around the living area, looking at Caleb's bookshelf. He had a strange collection. True crime, mostly. Books about serial killers lined the shelves. At the end, there was a large black binder, unlabeled and worn. It reminded me of the diary. I pulled it out. Inside were countless news clippings. The first one was about a woman who'd gone missing in the forest 20 years ago. Her body had never been found. Then there were more missing women. Creative journey together. Murdered prostitutes, missing men, all unsolved. I found clippings about Will Tanner's suicide and his wife's disappearance. Next to the article about the suicide, Caleb had scrawled HAA in red marker. I heard the click of a gun behind me. Caleb's voice came, cold and mocking. "Like my work friend." I stared at him, the binder still in my hands. "And it's you. You killed Will and his wife, and all these other people." It felt surreal. Caleb grinned, his eyes dead. "She was cheating on him with me," he hissed. "Just another whore. They always get what's coming to them." I saw something move behind Caleb, the twisted man, writhing in the shadows. "You need help," I whispered. Caleb laughed. "Help? They only help people like me with a needle. That's why you have to cover your tracks." The twisted man touched Caleb's neck. Caleb cried out, spinning around. I lunged for my shotgun as Caleb turned back, firing his pistol. The first bullet missed, but the second tore into my leg. I screamed in pain and grabbed the shotgun, firing. Caleb's head snapped back, a spray of blood and bone erupting from the wound. The twisted man stood there, hunched over, grinning at me. Blood poured down my leg. Was I dying? You weren't after me at all, were you?" I asked. You were after Caleb. The twisted man didn't answer. He simply vanished into the shadows of the bedroom. As dawn broke, I finally understood. The words the twisted man had spoken on the TV echoed in my mind. He is a killer. The shadow of death. Hardy here, many have fallen, he is watching you. He hadn't been threatening me. He'd been warning me. He'd probably tried to warn Will Tanner, too. I bandaged my leg, the pain searing. I found some painkillers in Caleb's bathroom and swallowed a handful. I knew I'd need them to make it to town. As I left, I glanced back at the cabin. In the doorway, the twisted man stood, his back hunched, a grotesque grin on his face. He raised a hand in a jerky wave. I waved back, started the snowmobile, and drove towards town. Let's begin our creative audio journey together. Life in Silent Creek has been pretty ordinary until a few days ago. My husband, Mark, and I had our usual spats like any couple, but nothing prepared me for the nightmare that was about to unfold. I'm an early riser. The day it all kicked off, I was up around dawn, party journey together, catching the pale light of the sunrise through the window. I glanced over at Mark's side of the bed, empty. The sheets were undisturbed, which was weird since he worked nights and was usually home and in bed by 3 or 4 a.m. But ever since we lost our baby girl, Lily, a few months back, he'd been acting off. He'd disappear for hours on end and sometimes bring these strange guys home. They were always young, with these vacant stares, and I'd never seen them before. They'd just trail after him in this creepy silence, like ducklings. Audio journey together. I made a pot of coffee and went out to the porch as the world started to stir. The sun climbed into the sky, a blazing eye in the clear blue. It was going to be another scorcher, humid and sticky. I watched the early morning joggers go by, wondering where Mark was. I checked my phone together. I tuned for any messages, but nothing. Sitting there, I couldn't help but think about how I was getting older. My blonde hair was starting to gray, and the lines around my eyes seemed to get deeper every day. The whole world felt like it was aging, turning to dust. I knew I wouldn't have another child, wouldn't see those bright blue eyes staring up at me from the crib again. Down the street, I saw this weird shimmering in the air like heat haze. It grew into this flat, shimmering wall, cutting through trees, houses, everything. It was moving closer, audio journey together. At first, I thought it was some kind of weather thing, a mirage or something. I got bored waiting and started scrolling through the news on my phone. A few minutes later, I went inside to fix some breakfast. I headed to the freezer, looking for something easy, maybe some chicken tenders and eggs. Instead, I found a severed head, a human head. The eyes were wide open, staring, and it was covered in frost. I dropped my coffee mug, shattered on the floor, hot coffee splashing all over my legs. Audio journey together. I couldn't stop the scream that ripped from my throat. A freezing mist crept out from the freezer, obscuring the face for a second. At first, I thought it was a mannequin, but then I saw the blue lips, pressed together like it was disapproving of me. A journey together. I saw the ragged edges of flesh at the neck, and it was real. Frozen blood clung the bottom, holding it upright. Between the lips, there was a folded piece of paper. To Sarah, it said in flowing black writing. I hesitated, then snatched the note. The lips held on for a second. Then it came loose with this wet, sucking sound. The second I got the note free, a siren went off down the street, deafening. It wailed for a few seconds. The fridge shook in front of me. Black mist started oozing out of everything. When it cleared, the fridge looked 50 years older. Audio journey together. Covered in rust, and the smell of rot hit me like a punch in the gut. The rest of the kitchen was the same. Everything was old and filthy, cobwebs everywhere, cracks in the walls, broken windows. I looked back at the head. It was a woman, maybe early 20s, with dark hair and blue eyes. Who was she? How did she die? How did she end up in my freezer? What the hell was that siren? I unfolded the note. It was Mark's handwriting. My heart sank as I read. Sarah, If you're reading this, you found the head. That's probably for the best. There are things I've kept hidden from you, from everyone, for so long. I don't know when it started, when this other part of me took over. It began small, peeking in windows, stalking joggers. It was a thrill, getting away with it. Then I started breaking into houses, rearranging furniture. Audioing each other, I'd hide a camera and watch their reactions. It was fun. Life needs more laughter, right? It can feel like wandering through a desert. But then there were these oases. This other part of me the first time I killed. It was an accident. Maybe it was fate. The first stone rolling down a hill that would become an avalanche. I was doing my usual thing, breaking in, moving stuff, sometimes writing weird stuff on the walls, just to mess with people, but I always carried my gun. I'd been watching this old house, surrounded by trees. It looked empty. Together. Perfect. One night I went in. Then, in the middle of the night, I heard the front door unlock. I tried to run, but the guy heard me. He came around the corner with a shotgun, red-faced, screaming. I was climbing out the bathroom window when he raised the gun. The sound our creative journey, him cocking it, was like a scream from God. It was kill or be killed. I aimed and fired twice. I remember the rush when his face had disintegrated. After that, it gets blurry. I thought I was having a breakdown, because something started wearing my face, following me, creative audio journey together. Maybe it's part of me, my true self. After all, killing is powerful. Anyway, I'm rambling. I need to finish this before I sound completely insane. Just don't look behind you. I'll see you soon. I read the last line over and over. Don't look behind you. What did that mean? Let's begin our creative audio journey together. Then I heard giggling from the tree. Was low at first, like the start of an earthquake. The door was cracked open. One bloodshot eye stared at me. It darted back and forth, the pupil huge and wild. Mark, I whispered, feeling sick. What's wrong? I backed towards the front door. The giggling turned into a gurgle. The door swung open, and he stood there, pale, bloodless. Dried blood covered his arms and hands. Under his nails, there was clotted blood. Black shadows swirled around him, like a dark tornado. Creative audio journey together. They distorted his face, getting stronger every second. Mark isn't here anymore. He hissed, his voice diseased. His lips split, showing teeth that were way too long and sharp. He's gone. He tries to claw his way back, even now. He stepped towards me, holding a bloody butcher knife. Stay away, Dio, from me. I screamed, glancing behind me. The town was different now. The streets were empty. Shadows danced everywhere, like a solar eclipse. The whole world seemed to exhale a low, sick hiss. This monster wearing Mark's face kept coming closer, feeding off the changes. Again, audio journer. His eyes turned black and cloudy. The shadows around him spun faster, his face. So thick, they miss Silas. He gurgled, lunging with the knife. I instinctively pulled back, stumbling through the front door onto the porch, hitting my head hard on the wood. Silas slunk towards me, a swirling mass of darkness with this horrifying human shape at its center. He grinned, a razor, sharp line across his face, letting my blood drip from the knife onto the rotting porch floor. I kicked out with everything I had, aiming for his knee. I heard a crack. RDAO journey together, felt leg give way with a sickening squelch. The flesh felt loose, almost boneless. Silas shrieked, a high-pitched wail that made my ears ring. He fell forward, the knife aimed at my chest, his face twisted with rage. Then, a gunshot. A perfect red hole appeared in Silas's shoulder. Together, he jerked, twisting and gurgling. Black blood splattered my face, cold as dry ice. I rolled away as his body hit the ground, the knife landing inches from me, the tip stuck in the wood. Silas's face started to melt and change, the human mask falling away. Creative audio journey together, revealing a spinning black hole for the single red eye in the center. Bleeding this oily black blood, he scrambled away on these long, skeletal limbs, crawling like a spider. His clothes stretched and tore around his changing body. Gasping for breath, I looked up at my savior. It was old Mr. Henderson, our neighbor. Everyone called him Old Man Henny. He was a loner, lived by himself. I'd talked to him a few times, even been inside his house once. It was full of taxidermied animals, bears, deer, moose. Guns, crossbows, hunting bows were everywhere. He was a real outdoorsman. Mr. Henderson, I choked out. Thank God. He shuffled forward, this small, thin old man with a sunken chest. His thick glasses made his eyes look huge, and his white beard went down to his chest. He looked like he'd walked straight out of a history book. He holstered his pistol and helped me up, his hand trembling. Something happened, he said grimly. When that siren went off, I was outside having my tea, and I saw it. Everything started shimmering, and this thick black mist came over everything. When it cleared this, he gestured at the street, this apocalyptic mess. The streets were cracked and broken, like an earthquake had hit. The houses were wrecked, windows shattered, roofs caved in. Spiderwebs covered everything. Behind me, the radio in the kitchen suddenly turned on, radiated the lights flickering. The power flickered on and off all down the street lights strobing. A metallic shriek came from the radio. We both jumped, turning back to it. This isn't the real world. A man screamed. It was Mark's voice. My heart dropped. Don't believe anything you see or hear. The anomaly is spreading. Sarah, I know you can hear me. I'm so sorry. Listen, to get out, you need to remember a few things. First, there are gateways here, portals back to our world. They have this blinding white light. It could be a door, a window, even a cabinet. They appear randomly and don't last long. If you find one, take it. It's your only way home. Second, the things here can look like anyone, but you'll know them by the shadows around them. To kill them, cardio journey together, you have to go for the red eye in the center of their face. There are places with food, water, supplies. They look like beat-up gas stations called Hell's Market. They're safe zones. But don't stay too long, or you might meet hell. She doesn't like visitors. Mark, where are you? I yelled at the radio, shaking it, hearing things rattling inside. But it just hissed with static and then went dead. My head was spinning. Was Mark alive? Why was his voice on the radio? Why was his writing on the note? Mr. Henderson put a hand on my shoulder. We'll create your journey, we'll find him, he said. But we need to move. We can't stay here. We need supplies. Everything here is trashed. It could be worse out there, I argued. What can't we just stay here and wait for the police, the military? Sarah, this isn't a normal situation, he said, his magnified eyes narrowing. We don't know how long we'll be here. You don't know where Mark is. We have nothing. We could starve here. He was right, I nodded. Okay, but let's grab some food and water first, I said. I went to the kitchen sink and turned on the tap. Nothing happened for a second. Then there was this gurgling sound from the pipes. They rattled like there were rats inside. The faucet sputtered and hissed dark water. Then it spat out thick blood, full of maggots. I gasped, jumping back. The smell was awful. I slammed the tap off. Yeah, figured, Mr. Henderson said. He looked around like he was on a Sunday stroll. The lights flickered and went out. The street lights outside went dark too. I opened the fridge. The smell of rot exploded out, making me gag. Black and yellow mold-covered twisted, rotten food. The milk was a soupy mess with black stuff growing in it. I slammed the door shut. I stuck my head out the front door, taking a deep breath of fresh air. Mr. Henderson followed. Looks like we're not getting anything here, he said. My place is the same. When the siren and the mist came, it aged everything. My food was rotten, my guns were rusted junk, my crossbows were broken. Some of them even had little black spiders on them. How did you get the pistol? I asked. He looked at me like I was slow. I had it on me, he said. I nodded, looking around for a weapon. I found Mark's old metal baseball bat in the living room. It was rusted, but it felt solid. Let's go, I said, following Mr. Henderson outside. We headed towards downtown, hoping to find supplies. The sky above was a swirling dark blue, No stars, no moon, just a black eye at the center. The clouds peeled away like old scabs. This pale light made everything look sickly. I saw pale, dirty faces disappearing into alleys and ruined houses, many of them kids. I saw them too. Miss Sir, journey together, Henderson muttered, clutching his pistol. They look like those pictures of kids from those camps. Starving, filthy. Where are their parents? I didn't want to think about it. What if this place was just snatching people, making them vanish? What if it was spreading our creative audio journey together? I'd almost forgotten about Silas, the thing wearing Mark's face, but he hadn't forgotten about me. We were passing this burnt-out truck when his shadowy face popped out from around the corner. He had these burnt-out eyes, black and smoldering. His body was this awful mix of spider and human, thin limbs ending in sharp points, covered in these fine, dark hairs. The bullet wound was gone. Black blood was caked on his clothes. He didn't hesitate. He swung one of those insect-like arms at Mr. Henderson. I screamed. Our journey together, it all happened in slow motion. The arm went straight through Mr. Henderson's chest. Bright red blood gushed out as he looked down in shock, still holding his gun. He gurgled, dropping the gun and falling forward, Silas's arm still stuck in him. I had the baseball bat. I swung with all my might, hitting Silas in the head. It connected with a sickening thud. His flesh caved in, and he hissed as the wound bubbled. I dove for the pistol. Mr. Henderson made this choked sound. The adrenaline blocked out the pain as I hit the ground, rolling. Together, I grabbed the cold metal of the gun. I raised it, feeling the slash Silas had given me earlier rip open again, blood soaking my clothes. I fired. The top of Silas's head exploded. His body changed, turning into this black, spidery thing with that single spinning red eye. Dark, horny together, oily blood leaked down its body. It had no mouth or nose, just those fine, silvery hairs on its limbs. The eye widened as it stared down the barrel. I remembered the radio message and aimed for the eye. "Why do you keep taking Mark's form?" I yelled at it. "I need to him. I can take the form of anyone who is part of the Church of the Final Rapture, those who have given their souls to the darkness here." He hissed. He lunged, trying to slash me with his other arm. I fired again and again. When the first bullet hit the eye, it exploded in this blinding flash, orange and red and black. I cried out, covering my eyes. When I could see again, there was just a smoking crater where Silas and Mr. Henderson had been. Gray smoke hissed from it. I knelt down, seeing this dark, jelly-like stuff on the ground. It was flesh, audio together, but I didn't know if it was human or something else. Shaken, I found Mr. Henderson's melted pants and felt around his waist for extra ammo. I'd used all the bullets fighting Silas. He only had one extra magazine. Feeling sick and weak, I stumbled on, heading downtown, audio journey there, hoping for some answers. I was barely able to stand. As I got closer to the center, I saw bodies hanging from lampposts, some mummified, some just skeletons. I wondered how many people were trapped in this nightmare. I heard crying in the distance. A little girl was kneeling beside a dead woman. The woman looked recently dead, her tongue sticking out, her skin blue. The girl's cries tore at me. She was wearing rags, covered in dirt and what looked like blood. Her face was dirty, but she had these big blue eyes. She looked up at me as I got closer, her face full of panic. She reminded me of Lily. My daughter had the same eyes. I looked around at this ruined world, seeing more spider webs everywhere. "Little girl, what are you doing here?" I asked. She grabbed my shirt, pressing her face against my leg. "They killed my mommy," she sobbed, not looking at the body. I hugged her. Who did?" I asked. "Who did this?" She looked up, surprised. "Don't you know? It's the Church of the Final Rapture, our creative audio journey together. They're trying to spread this." She waved her hand around. "They think if they spread this bad place, it'll bring the final judgment, and Jesus will come back. But first, they have to kill people and make the battle happen." She shook her head. "They're crazy. Religious nuts. Audio journey, their mommy always said." And she was right. What they did to her. Look, what's your name? I asked. Lily, she whispered. That name had hit me hard. I'm Sarah, I said. You can't stay here, Lily. There are bad things here. Is it true there are ways out? Doorways of light. I saw one once, she said. It was beautiful, like a rainbow. I thought I heard singing. Her eyes went distant. I took her hand, pulling her away from her mother's body. What happened? I asked, trying to keep her talking. I saw it, but by the time I found Mom, it was gone. We turned a corner. Looming ahead, we saw what was making the webs. My first thought was that it was a cross between a horse and an insect, about the size of a small car and over 12 feet long. It had a struggling old man in its jaws, which jutted out like serrated stag beetle pincers. Two huge black eyes bulged from the sides of its head, like baseballs, staring unblinking. I saw Lily and myself reflected in those dark orbs, like in an obsidian mirror. The creature's pale, of audio journey together, chitinous shell shimmered with rainbows as it moved. Its snout was rounded, with 2 nostril holes. Stringy, bloody mucus dripped from its face. Hundreds of long, skittering legs moved in waves. The old man in its jaws kicked and punched, but the monster didn't seem to notice our creatio journey together. Blood dribbled from his mouth, and deep cuts covered his body. His lips and fingernails were turning blue. As its eyes fixed on us, clear saliva bubbled from its pincers. With a hiss, it threw its head to the side. The dying man flew through the air, smashing into a concrete wall. Stop, I yelled, raising the pistol and firing. Lily screamed, running behind me and grabbing my leg as the creature charged. The first bullet hit its neck, but the thick black scales deflected it, leaving only cracks. I kept firing, aiming for its face. Together, the second bullet hit its right eye, which exploded in a spray of blue blood. It shrieked, a sound that made my ears ring. Half blinded, it kept coming. I jumped to the side, but Lily wasn't fast enough. The creature's pincers wrapped around her chest, lifting her into the air. Deep cuts appeared in her clothes as she cried for help. I took a breath, aiming for the creature's face, trying not to hit her. The last bullet in the magazine hit its other eye. It exploded. The creature dropped Lily, wailing. I grabbed her hand and pulled her away. Run, I hissed, to begin creative audio journey together, pulling her forward. Up ahead I saw lights shining from a store. It was the only building with power. As we got closer I saw the sign, Hell's Market. The creature's screams drew more of those things. They crawled out of the alleys, their horse-like faces and insect jaws moving as if they were tasting the air. I remembered the radio message the markets were safe. We ran inside. The building hadn't decayed like everything else. It was cool, air-conditioned. The glass was intact, and rows of drinks, ice cream, together, and frozen meals stretched out in front of us. It looked like a normal convenience store, but in the back, there was a dark doorway leading down to a basement. I shivered. Outside, the creatures stopped at the door, their eyes fixed on us. Are you okay? I asked Lily, checking her injuries. The creature had left 2 deep cuts on her chest. They were bleeding. She nodded, tears in her eyes. We grabbed drinks and snacks, eating and drinking quickly. I hadn't realized how hungry I was, and Lily looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Creatio journey together. I was watching the creatures outside when I heard heavy footsteps coming from the back of the store. Lily grabbed my hand. Something's coming, she whispered. Through the dark doorway, I saw a woman, almost 10 feet tall. The left half of her body was decayed and gray, like everything else in this world. The right half was young and beautiful, the skin pink and healthy. She was dragging a man bound in barbed wire. It was Mark, I said, stepping back. See, your husband, the woman hissed. Her voice was like shadows. She threw Mark to the ground, journeyed to there. He screamed, kicking and twisting. Jake, out of here, he whispered, his teeth covered in blood. They'll help you. Did you do this? I asked. The woman looked at us, a cruel smile on the living half of her face. The dead half cracked, showing black teeth. Mark nodded. Journey together. The Church of the Final Rapture. We tried to spread the anomaly, to end suffering, to make God notice us. The woman laughed, a sound like metal scraping. Foolish men, she gurgled. You shouldn't have played with things you didn't understand. Mark's eyes widened. Begin our audio journey together. He looked at me, pointing towards the dark doorway at the back. I'll do what I can with what the church taught me, he said. He closed his eyes as the woman came closer. She lifted her giant foot over his head. It came down with a crunch. As Mark died, the doorway at the back of the store started to shimmer with white light. I heard singing coming from it. I grabbed Lily's hand. As Mark died, the doorway at the back of the store pulsed with blinding white light. I could hear a faint, ethereal singing coming from it. I grabbed Lila's hand, and let's begin our creative audio journey together, pulling her towards the shimmering portal. The woman turned her decaying gaze on us. You won't escape, she rasped, her voice a mix of dry whispers and wet gurgles. She took a step towards us, her massive form shaking the store. The creatures outside began clawing at the windows, RDU together, their black eyes burning with hunger. Run, I shouted to Lily, pulling her through the doorway. We stumbled into what looked like a forest clearing, bathed in warm sunlight. Birds were singing, and the air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. Journey together. It was so different from the nightmare we just left. But the relief was short-lived. The clearing shimmered, the trees wavering like heat haze. The singing grew louder, then distorted into a cacophony of screams. The ground beneath us began to tremble. We weren't out, audio journey together. The portal hadn't taken us home. It had taken us somewhere else. Behind us, the doorway from Hell's Market vanished, leaving only solid rock. We were trapped. Suddenly, the trees around us began to twist and contort, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The sunlight flickered and died, replaced by the same sickly blue light from before. The forest was turning into another part of the anomaly. From the shadows of the distorted trees, more of those horse creatures emerged, their eyes fixed on us. They were closing in. I looked at Lily. Together. Her face pale and drawn. She was still clutching the small teddy bear she'd picked up in Hell's Market. It was one of the few things that hadn't been touched by the decay. We have to keep moving, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I scanned our surroundings, desperate for another escape. Then I saw it. In the distance, a faint white glow was emanating from between two of the twisted trees. It was another portal, smaller than the one from the market, but still radiating that same blinding light. Lily, look, I pointed. We started running towards it, the creatures, skittering legs echoing behind us. We were almost there when one of the creatures lunged, its pincers snapping just inches from Lily's face. I shoved her forward, stumbling as the creature's leg brushed against my own. It was enough to throw me off balance. I fell to the ground, scraping my hands and knees. Lily reached the portal and turned back, her eyes wide with terror. Sarah, she cried. The creatures were closing in on me, their shadows looming over me. I looked at Lily, tears welling up in my eyes. Go, I yelled. Go now, don't look back. She hesitated for a moment, then, with a sob, she stepped through the portal. The light intensified, then vanished, leaving only the distorted forest and the approaching creatures. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end, but it never came. Instead, everything went silent. The blue light faded, replaced by darkness. Then, slowly, a different light began to dawn. It was warm, golden, the light of a sunrise. I was lying in my bed. The sun was streaming through the window. I journeyed to I could hear birds chirping outside. I looked over at Mark's side of the bed. It was empty. I got up, my body etching, my mind reeling. I went to the kitchen. It was clean, normal. No severed head, no rust, no decay. I went to the freezer. It was full of frozen food. It had all been a dream. A terrible, vivid dream. But as I made my coffee, I noticed something on the kitchen counter. A small, tattered teddy bear. Alright, so, camping. Not my thing, never has been. But somehow, I let the guys talk me into it. Maybe I'm a pushover, or maybe I just didn't want to be that guy, you know? Anyway, there I was, stuck in a car with 4 of my best buds. Ethrian was Ryan, Sam was Gaby, Olivia was Lisa, creative audio journey together, and Maya was Chloe, heading off for a weekend in the woods. We had enough gear for a small army tents, sleeping bags, food, and enough firewood to keep a bonfire going for a week straight. We were going to be those guys you see in the movies, the ones who have these epic adventures they talk about forever. Or so we thought. The hiking was brutal. Way longer than any of us expected. The forest was crazy dense, the kind where the trees are so thick the sun can barely get through. Everything was just damp and green. It smelled our Creayo journey together. Smelled like wet dirt and old leaves. It was kind of pretty, I guess, in that creepy, I wouldn't want to be here alone at night kind of way. The trees felt like they were watching us, their branches kind of leaning in like they were eavesdropping. And here's where it started to get weird. Or Creayo Jerther, I kept getting this feeling like we were going in circles, like, I swear, we passed the same messed up tree at least 3 times. It was split near the bottom, making this jagged, wah shape. I tried to tell myself I was just being paranoid, but then I'd look back, Arnie together. Bam, there was that damn white tree again, like it was following us. Nobody else seemed to notice though, so I kept my mouth shut. Are we there yet? I finally asked, breaking the silence that had fallen over us like a heavy blanket. Ethan and Maya groaned, probably thinking I was just being a whiner. But Olivia didn't say anything. She was walking a little ahead of us, her pace slowing down. She kept glancing over her shoulder, like she was expecting something to jump out of the woods. By the time we got to the clearing, even I had to admit, something felt off. Not dangerous exactly, just off. First of all, there was already a fire pit there, a perfect circle of stones that looked way too new. Like someone had built it 5 minutes before we got there. Even the trees around the clearing were weird, all spaced out evenly, all leaning in toward the center. Well, that's convenient, Maya said, trying to laugh it off, but it sounded fake as hell. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't the first ones to find this place. Not by a long shot. We started setting up the tents, and I caught Olivia staring into the woods again. Her hands were actually shaking a little as she unfolded her tent. You all right? I asked her, nodded, but she wouldn't look me in the eye. Yeah, just I don't know. It's too quiet. Night came way too fast. 1 minute. Together. The sky was all orange and red, and the next it was just black. Not like the sun had set, but like someone had flipped a switch and turned off all the lights. The fire was crackling, throwing these crazy shadows that danced on the trees. The clearing felt smaller now, audio journey together, like those trees were closing in even more. I glanced at Olivia. She wasn't joining in with the jokes and stories. She was just staring at the fire pit, tracing patterns in the dirt with her finger. Liv, I asked, keeping my voice low. She jumped, like I'd startled her, audio journey together, and wiped her hand on her jeans with these huge wide eyes. You good? Fine, she said, but way too fast. Then this whistling sound came from the woods, and her head snapped around. She just stared, unblinking, her lips moving like she was saying something. But no sound came out. Did you hear that? I asked, my heart starting to pound. Don't, she whispered so quiet I almost didn't hear her. Don't look for it. Her words sent a chill down my spine, but before I could say anything else, Ethan groaned, super loud. Dude, it's just the wind. Chill. I wasn't so sure. That whistle wasn't random. It sounded on purpose, almost like someone was calling a dog or something. No, seriously, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That sounded like someone whistling. Sam groaned this time. Here we go. Don't start with the scary stories, man. You're just trying to freak us out. But I wasn't. I knew what I heard. The others brushed it off, acting like I was being an idiot. But then it came again. Louder this time. A long, clear whistle. like someone calling for their dog. Our creative audio journey together, it echoed through the trees, too sharp, too human. Probably just some other hiker, Maya said, but even she sounded a little freaked out. Hikers don't whistle like that at night, I whispered. After that, everything felt different. The joke stopped, and nobody was really talking anymore. We all went to our tents early, but I couldn't sleep. Every little noise, a rustling leaf, a creaking branch made my heart jump. And then, just as I was finally starting to drift off, I heard it again. The whistle. Only this time, it was closer. Much closer. Journey together. The fire had burned down a pile of glowing embers, barely giving off any light. Then, that whistle came again, clearer now, closer. It cut through the silence of the woods. Sharp and well, it didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. I sat up in my tent, my heart hammering against my ribs, and slowly unzipped the flap. The clearing looked different. It was the same clearing, but the trees seemed even closer now, their branches twisted and gnarled, like skeletal fingers reaching for our tents. And the fire pit. The fire pit looked like no one had even used it. The stones were spotless, like they'd just been placed there. I stumbled out of my tent, grabbing my flashlight. Ethan. Sam. My voice sounded weirdly loud in the quiet. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Bare, human footprints. RDO journey together. All over the dirt. They led from the edge of the clearing, right up to the tents, and stopped right outside mine. A twig snapped behind me. Liv. I whispered, slowly turning around. She was standing at the edge of the clearing, barely visible in the darkness. Her face was pale. Her lips parted like she was about to say something, but she didn't. "What are you doing out here?" I asked, my voice shaking a little. She tilted her head, kind of like a confused puppy, and her expression was blank. "It's already too late," she said, so softly I almost didn't hear her. "It always is." "What?" I took a step toward her, but she just turned and disappeared into the shadows. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, and then I heard it, breathing, slow, deliberate breathing right behind me. I didn't dare turn around. Creative audio journey together. Every single cell in my body was screaming at me to move, to run, to do something, but I was frozen, paralyzed by that breathing. It was close, way too close, and it sounded wet, uneven, like whatever was making it had been running for miles. I could feel it on the back of my neck, a faint our journey there, a faint, warm breath. You know that feeling. That feeling you get when you know something's wrong, even if you can't see it. Like when you're walking home alone at night, and you feel like someone's watching you from the shadows. You tell yourself it's nothing, you're just being paranoid. But deep down, you know it's not your imagination. That's what this was, only 1,000 times worse. Because this wasn't in my head. This was real. I gripped my flashlight tighter, my sweaty fingers slipping on the plastic. I wanted to yell, to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat, choked, evoked by this growing feeling of dread that whatever was behind me wasn't human. Then the breathing stopped. Just like that. No footsteps, no rustling in the trees. It just stopped. Like whoever was there had just vanished. I finally forced myself to move, arty together, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. I stumbled toward Ethan's tent, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. I saw something on the ground, a faint, wet glint. At first, I thought it was dew, but when I got closer, I realized it was blood. The footprints, they were smeared now. Let's begin our creative audio journey together, with streaks of red leading back into the woods. But what really freaked me out was that there were more of them. Not just one set of footprints. 3. They were messed up though, like someone was dragging their feet on the ground, and twisted, almost like they weren't made by normal feet. Jarred, I scrambled to Ethan's tent, ripping open the zipper. "Ethan," I hissed. My flashlight beam swept over an empty sleeping bag, rumpled and cold. No Ethan. No Sam. No Olivia or Maya. I stood there, a lump forming in my throat, the silence pressing in, thicker than the darkness. Journey together. Then I noticed it, my breath, hanging in the air in front of me like it was freezing cold. The temperature had dropped. But it wasn't just cold. It was wrong. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like you don't belong. Like you're not supposed to be here. Audio journey together. The whistle came again, louder now, impossibly close. It didn't sound human anymore. It sounded broken, jagged, like something was trying to mimic the sound but didn't know how. It echoed through the clearing, bouncing off the trees until it felt like it was coming from everywhere at once. In our cardio journey together then, I saw it. The trees at the edge of the clearing were swaying, but not from the wind. Something was moving between them. A shadow too big, too tall, stretching out unnaturally in the dim light of the dying fire. It moved weirdly, jerky, like a puppet with tangled strings. But it was moving slow, on purpose. It stopped just beyond the firelight, and for a second I thought it was gone. Then I saw the eyes. They weren't really eyes, not like ours. Just two tiny, faint pinpricks of light, like the reflections you see in a cat's eyes at night. But they didn't blink. They didn't move. They just stared unblinking right at me. You know how in nightmares you know you're dreaming, but you can't wake up. That's what this was. A living nightmare, and I was trapped. The whistle came again, long and slow, and this time it felt like an invitation, or a warning. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The sound of snapping branches and crunching leaves told me everything I needed to know. It was following me. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to keep running, but the forest seemed endless. The trees were a blur, our creative audio journey together, twisting around me like I was trapped in some kind of crazy maze. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, the beam shaking with every panicked step I took. My lungs were burning, my legs felt like jelly, and just when I thought I couldn't take another step, I tripped, going down hard. The flashlight flew out of my hand and the bulb shattered with a soft pop, plunging me into near darkness. I lay there for a second, gasping for air, too terrified to move. Then, I heard it again, the whistle. But it wasn't behind me anymore. It was to my left. "Stop it," I shouted, audio of my voice cracking. "What do you want?" The forest didn't answer. Of course it didn't. It just loomed around me, silent and suffocating. I scrambled to my feet, my hands shaking as I searched for anything I could use as a weapon, a rock, a branch, anything. That's when I heard the voice. "Jother, Nick, is that you?" It was Olivia. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. I couldn't see her, but her voice was unmistakable, echoing softly through the trees. Relief and confusion warred in my chest. "Liv, where are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. A moment later, Ayo Jardio together, she stepped out of the shadows, her face pale in the moonlight. She was wearing her jacket, but it was ripped, and her hair was all messed up, full of dirt and leaves. She looked wrong. She was smiling, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I've been looking for you," she said, her voice soft, almost too calm. "You ran off, and I got worried. I ran off." I snapped, fear making me braver than I felt. Everyone was gone. What happened? Where's Ethan? Sam? Maya? Her smile faltered, just for a second. "I don't know. We got separated, but we can get separate to go. Now, it's not safe here." "No kidding," I muttered, glancing nervously over my shoulder. "There's something out there, Liv, something." "I know," she interrupted, her tone sharper than I expected. "I saw it too. That's why we need to move this and Ving." She was something about her felt off. I couldn't explain it, but the way she avoided my eyes, the way her hands kept fidgeting at her sides, it didn't feel right. But what choice did I have? I wasn't going to survive out here alone. "Fine," I said. "But we need to find the others." She hesitated, just for a split second, before nodding. "Of course. Come on. I think I know a way out." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, and pulled me through the trees. She moved fast, like she knew exactly where she was going, but her path didn't make any sense. It was all winding and looping, like she was leading me in circles. The whistle came again, further away now, but still too close. "How do you know where we're going?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "I don't," she said quickly. too quickly. I think there's a road this way. But we didn't come from this direction, I pointed out. She stopped abruptly, spinning to face me. Her expression was strange, a mix of frustration and fear. Do you trust me or not? She demanded, her voice low and urgent. I didn't. Not really. But before I could answer, a guttural growl ripped through closer than ever. I didn't have time to argue. We ran, the sound of heavy footsteps crashing through the forest behind us. We reached a small clearing, and Olivia pulled me toward a cluster of rocks. Hide here, she hissed, pushing me down behind one of the larger boulders. Stay quiet. What about you? I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I'll distract it. She said, her expression unreadable. Just stay here, okay? And then she was gone. Begin our creative audio journey together, disappearing into the shadows before I could stop her. I crouched behind the rock, every nerve on edge, as the growling grew louder. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, a presence in the dark, watching, waiting. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Olivia's voice, but she wasn't calling out to me. She was whistling. Long and slow, the same broken tune that had been haunting us all night. I don't know how long I hid there, crouched behind that rock, frozen in the darkness. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was happening. I slowly peeked out from behind the rock. The forest was empty, silent, too silent. And then I saw her, Olivia, standing at the edge of the clearing, staring right at me. Her face was blank, her eyes glassy, but her lips were curved into that same unsettling smile. Come on, Nick, she said, her voice soft, almost like a song. It's safe now. But it wasn't her voice. Not really. It was too flat, too hollow. Like someone wearing her skin had learned to mimic her words. And behind her, just barely visible in the shadows, were the eyes. 2 pinpricks of light glowing faintly. I didn't wait. I bolted. I ran until my legs felt like they were going to snap, until my breath came in ragged gasps that tore at my throat. But no matter how far I ran, creative audio journey together, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't running away, I was being herded. The trees seemed to close in tighter, the roots reaching out like claws, trying to trip me. And Olivia's whistle, God, that whistle, it never stopped. Long, slow, and deliberate, audio journey together, like it was weaving through the forest itself, carried on a wind that didn't even touch my skin. Sometimes it was close, so close I thought she was right behind me, but when I turned, there was nothing. Other times it was distant, echoing like it was coming from everywhere at once, audio journey together. Then I burst through the trees, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't just any clearing, it was the clearing. The same one we'd set up camp in. The fire pit was smoldering faintly again, the stones arranged in their perfect, unnatural circle. The tents were back, their flaps closed like no one had touched them. No, I whispered, my voice hoarse. This can't be. A chill ran down my spine when I saw the tree just beyond the clearing. DY. Tree. Its jagged trunk loomed like a marker, its presence mocking me. I'd been here before. I'd never left. The tents were back. All of them. Perfectly pitched, just like they had been before we went to sleep. My stomach twisted. I knew they hadn't been here when I left. I'd seen the empty space. But now they stood there, like nothing had happened. The flaps closed, audio journey together, their shapes too still in the dim light. Nick. A voice called softly, and my blood turned to ice. It was Ethan. His voice was weak, hoarse, coming from one of the tents. Nick, help me. My instinct screamed to me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Ethan. I cried. Where have you been? No answer. Just the soft, rhythmic rustle of fabric, like something shifting inside the tent. Nick. This time, it wasn't Ethan's voice. It was Sam's, coming from another tent. Then Olivia's. One by one, they called out to me, their voices layered over each other, too smooth, too perfect, like they were reading from the same script. Nick, help us. Nick, we're hurt. Nick, don't leave us. The flap of Ethan's tent twitched, and something slid out. Not him. Not anything human. Creative Audio Journey. It was a hand, or at least it was shaped like one, but the fingers were too long, the skin too pale. Almost see through. It gripped the edge of the fabric, and then another hand joined it, pulling the flap wider. I stumbled back, my chest tightening, as a shape began to emerge. It was Cardio Journey. It was Ethan, or something trying to be Ethan. His face was wrong, stretched and gaunt. His eyes black pits that seemed to swallow the light. His mouth hung open, wider than it should, his jaw creaking like old wood. Nick. It rasped, its voice still carrying that echo of his, but layered with something else. Something deeper. Hungrier. The tent beside his moved, then the next and the next. More of them were coming out, each one twisted, misshapen, their forms shifting like shadows trying to hold a human shape. And behind them, from the dark edges of the clearing, together came the sound of Olivia's whistle. Slow, steady, closer. I scrambled back, tripping over the fire pit, and hit the ground hard. My head spun, and for a second all I could see was the sky above, the stars, faint and distant, winking through the gaps in the canopy. And then, Audio Journey together. Something moved in my peripheral vision. I turned, my heart hammering in my chest, and froze. There was something standing at the edge of the clearing. Taller than the trees, its body impossibly thin, a silhouette that didn't belong in this world. Its head was wrong, too narrow, too elongated, and its arms hung like lifeless branches. But its face, oh God, its face, it didn't have one, just a smooth, featureless plane that seemed to ripple and shimmer like water. But I knew it was looking at me. I could feel it. The whistling stopped. And they silently together, the silence that followed was worse than any sound, pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. And then, in a voice that wasn't Olivia's, but somehow still was, it spoke. You shouldn't have come here. The words didn't echo. They didn't even sound like they were spoken aloud, the Audio Journey together. They just were, filling the space around me, inside me, until they became my own thoughts. The creature stepped forward, and the ground seemed to bend beneath it, the earth rippling like a reflection in disturbed water. The things that had crawled out of the tents froze, their heads snapping toward it as if waiting for a command. Run. The voice whispered again, but this time it sounded amused, mocking. I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted into the forest. The sound of my own ragged breathing barely drowning out the rustle of something massive moving behind me. But as I ran, I realized something horrible. The trees weren't where they were supposed to be. They shifted, their trunks sliding in and out of place, the path twisting and looping back on itself like a labyrinth with no way out. Every step felt heavier, slower, like the ground itself was trying to pull me down. And then I heard it, Olivia's whistle. But this time, it wasn't ahead of me or behind me. It was inside my head. It came our Creamer's name with words now, her voice weaving through my, it's like a spider spinning a web. You can't run, Nick. You never could. And as the whistle grew louder, I realized something I hadn't before, something that sent a cold wave of dread crashing over me. It didn't want to kill me, our creative audio journey together. I kept running, but it didn't matter. The forest wasn't a forest anymore, it was alive, shifting and twisting, trapping me in its grasp. My legs felt heavier with every step, as though the ground was pulling me down, and my lungs burned like fire. Audio journey together. Every direction I turned led back to the same place of darkness. No clearing, no road, no way out. The whistle was constant now, burrowing into my skull. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a presence, something alive, wrapping itself around my thoughts like a parasite. Every step I took, every ragged breath I drew, it was there, mocking me, guiding me. You shouldn't have come here. Olivia's voice echoed in my mind, but it wasn't just her anymore. It was Ethan's, Sam's, Maya's. All of them blending together into something that wasn't human. Their voices overlapped, together weaving into a symphony of whispers that drowned out even my own thoughts. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voices were inside me now. I stumbled to a stop, collapsing against a tree. My legs couldn't carry me anymore. My body was spent. Audio journey together. The forest seemed to close in around me, the shadows stretching longer, darker, until they swallowed everything. I looked up, desperate for the sky, for the stars, something, anything to remind me I was still in the real world. But the sky was gone. Above me, there was only blackness. Not the darkness of night, but something deeper, something void, something alive. And in that void I saw them, those pinpricks of light, too many to count, scattered like stars but wrong, too sharp, too aware. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was raw, our creative audio journey together. My voice stolen by the same force that had taken everything else. That's when I saw Olivia again. She stepped out from the trees, her movements smooth, deliberate. Her clothes were still torn, her hair still matted with dirt, but her face was different. There was no fear there now, nor need together. No urgency. Just a calm, unsettling stillness, her eyes empty pools of black that reflected nothing. "You're tired," she said softly, her voice echoing in my mind even though her lips barely moved. "I told you not to run." I tried to back away, but my body wouldn't move. The ground beneath me seemed to shift, pulling me down like quicksand. I clawed at the dirt, but my hands sank deeper with every movement, as though the earth itself had turned against me. "Stop fighting," Olivia whispered. She crouched in front of me, her head tilting at an unnatural angle. "It's easier if you don't fight." "Why, my voice cracked, barely audible. "Why are you doing this?" Her smile widened, stretching her face in a way that wasn't human. "Because you came here," she said simply, as if that explained everything. "Because you heard the whistle." I shook my head, creative audio journey to their tears streaming down my face. "I didn't know. None of you ever do." Her voice was almost gentle now, like a mother comforting a child. "But it doesn't matter. You heard it, and now you belong to." "What is it?" I whispered. Her eyes flicked toward the darkness behind her. Native audio, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. It stepped out of the void, its form shifting, unraveling and reforming with every step. It was too tall, too thin, its limbs too long and angular, its face, if it even had one, smooth and blank. But the worst part was the way it moved. It didn't walk or glide, it folded into existence, like the space around it was bending to its will. "You're part of it now," Olivia said, her voice fading as the thing approached. "We all are." I tried to scream again, but my voice was gone. My mind was unraveling, the whispers growing louder, until I couldn't tell where they ended and I began. The thing crouched down, its featureless head tilting as if studying me. I could feel it pressing into my thoughts, peeling back my memories, my fears, everything that made me me. And then, finally, I understood. Let's begin our creative audio journey together. There was no escape. There never been. This wasn't just a forest. It was a trap, a living, breathing thing that fed on people like me, people foolish enough to stray too far, to hear the whistle, to follow it into the dark. I felt my body sinking deeper into the ground, the cold earth swallowing me whole. Olivia knelt beside me, her hand brushing my arm. Her skin was ice, but her touch felt like it belonged to a stranger. "Don't fight it," she murmured again. "Soon, you'll forget, and then it won't hurt anymore." I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream. But as the darkness closed over me, I realized I didn't have the strength. The last thing I saw was Olivia's face, her hollow smile etched into my mind like a scar. The last thing I heard was the whistle, soft and haunting, fading as the world dissolved around me. And then there was nothing. Our creative audio journey together. I jolt awake, gasping for air, my body drenched in sweat. My hands clutched at the dirt beneath me, solid and real. For a moment, I couldn't move, my mind still trapped in the suffocating nightmare. My heart pounded in my chest, and I frantically looked around. I was in the clearing, creative audio journey together. The fire was out, but still smoldering faintly, a thin line of smoke curling into the starry sky. The tents were exactly where they had been, untouched. The forest was silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the faint breeze. It was just a dream. Just a terrible, awful dream. I forced myself to sit up, my breath still coming in ragged gaspies. But as I did, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. My hands were trembling. Beneath the dirt caked on my palms, there were scratches. Deep, jagged scratches, as if I'd been clawing at the earth. It wasn't entirely a dream. "Nick, you okay?" A voice called softly. I turned to see Ethan emerging from his tent, rubbing his eyes. Behind him, Maya and Sam were stirring, their groggy voices breaking the stillness. My words caught in my throat. I wanted to tell them, to scream that something was wrong, that we needed to leave right now. But my mouth felt dry, the words stuck somewhere between my panic and the rational part of my brain that tried to convince me it was just a dream. "What's wrong?" Maya asked, stepping closer. Her face was etched with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I think we're in danger." I finally managed to choke out. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, shaky and strained. "There's something in these woods. Something watching us." Ethan frowned, his half-awake expression quickly turning skeptical. "You had a bad dream, man. That's all it is. You're freaking yourself out." "No," I snapped, louder than I meant to. The others flinched, and I immediately regretted it, but I couldn't stop. It wasn't just a dream. I heard it. I felt it. Audio journey together. There's something out there, and we need to leave. Now. "Nick," Sam said carefully, his voice low, like he was trying not to spook me. "It's the middle of the night. We're miles from anywhere. Let's just wait until morning, okay? If you're still freaked out, we'll pack up and go." "Morning." The word sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't explain why, but the thought of staying until dawn felt wrong. Like something terrible would happen if we didn't leave now. "Please," I whispered, my voice cracking. "We can't stay here." "Nick," Maya started, but her voice trailed off. Her gaze shifted past me into the forest, and her face went pale. "What?" I asked, turning to follow her eyes, but there was nothing there, just the trees, dark and impenetrable. "I thought I saw." She shook her head, rubbing her arms as if suddenly cold. "Never mind. It's probably just a deer or something," Ethan muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. I wanted to argue, to grab them and drag him out of the clearing if I had to. But before I could, the whistle came. Faint at first, so faint it was almost indistinguishable from the wind. My stomach dropped. "What the hell is that?" Sam asked, his face going pale. "I told you," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rising pitch of the whistle. "It's here." The others exchanged nervous glances, and for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. "Maybe a journey to go." Maya said go, her voice trembling. Ethan opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, the whistle grew louder, more deliberate, echoing through the trees like it was circling us. The air felt heavier, colder, the oppressive silence closing in again. "Grab your stuff," I said, my voice firm now. "We're leaving." We scrambled to pack, but something about the air felt wrong, like it was thickening around us, pressing against my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every time I glanced at the tree line, audio journey together, I expect to see those pinprick eyes staring back at me. As we moved to leave, I felt a tug-of-de-voo, like I'd done this before. Like I'd already tried to run, only to end up back in the clearing. The thought made my head spin, my pulse quicken. "What if?" I started, but the words stuck in my throat. What if there was no way out? What if we were already trapped? The whistle came again, piercing and sharp, cutting through my thoughts. This time it wasn't distant. It was right behind us. "Run!" I screamed, and we bolted, plunging into the forest, audio journey together. The trees blurred around us, and my heart pounded so loudly I couldn't hear anything else, not the others, not even my own breathing. But as we ran, the forest seemed to shift, the trees warping and twisting like they were alive. I could feel it, an invisible pull, drawing us back, audio journey together, no matter which direction we went. Then, suddenly, I burst into a clearing and stopped dead in my tracks. My blood turned to ice. It was the same clearing. The tents were back, the fire smoldering faintly. And standing there, by the edge of the woods, was Olivia. She turned to look at me, together, her face calm, her eyes empty, and her lips curling into that same unnatural smile. "Nick," she said softly, her voice carrying on the wind, "you can't leave. You know that?" Behind her, the shadows stirred, and those pinprick eyes blinked into existence, one by one. And that's when I realized I wasn't waking up from this, because I'd never left. Audio journey together. My life was a train wreck. My marriage was circling the drain. I was one screw up away from getting canned at the plant, and I was hitting the bottle so hard I'd black out and wake up drowning in a sea of regret. Basically, I was hanging on by a thread. One November morning, together, that thread got snipped. I'd passed out on the couch after starting my Friday night bender the second I clocked out. I remember the first bar, and how that first shot of rye went down like liquid fire. Felt so damn good, I ordered another. Then, audio journey together. Nothing until I cracked my eyelids open and the hangover hit me like a sledgehammer to the face. I groaned. If hangovers are a lesson, then I was the world's slowest learner. But at that moment, I was ready to swear off the sauce forever. Audio journey together. I would have done anything to never feel like that again. I would have gone on the wagon. Started eating kale. Hell, I might have even joined a gym. And maybe I would have. Maybe that was the moment I could have turned things around. Except, as I lay there, head throbbing and stomach churning, audio journey together, I realized someone was standing over me. I tried to focus, and the blurry shapes morphed into the love of my life. Now, Sarah wasn't a beauty queen, but she'd knocked the wind out of me the first time I saw her. She was kicking the crap out of her car tire. It was flat. Begin our creative audio journey together, naturally, and once I got my lungs working again, I went over and real smooth, like, fixed it for her. We got hitched a year later. She was 19, I was 20, way too young. I was 29 going on 60 that morning, squinting up at her. Either I braced myself for the yelling, that's how we'd been communicating lately. Then I saw the tears streaking her mascara. "What is it?" I croaked, trying to sit up. The pain shifted, drilling a hole behind my eyes. I blinked back a tear of my own. "Look," she said, pointing at the TV, audio together. The screen showed the inside of a store. Looked like a tornado had ripped through it. Stuff was scattered everywhere, broken glass in puddles of some nasty-looking liquid. A light fixture was dangling from the ceiling by a thread, and the front window was smashed, a big, begin our audio journey together, jagged hole right in the middle. Then some news anchor's voice, all calm and collected, said the shocked owner was met by this sight when he went to open up his family business at 5 a.m. this morning. Arnie together. Police would like to speak to this man who was captured on the shop's CCTV. A grainy picture popped up, guy all scruffy and wild-eyed, standing in the middle of the mess. It was me. I looked at Sarah. "I don't remember," I started. She turned away. "Get out," she said, yearning together, voice colder than a well digger's backside, "and don't come back." If I'd had any guts, I would have marched straight to the police station and turned myself in. Taken my lumps for being a drunken idiot. Our creative audio journey together. But all I felt as I stumbled out in the street was a swirling vortex of self, disgust, and fear. I'd lost my wife. I was going to lose my job. And the thought of jail scared the living daylights out of me. I had to get out of there before someone recognized me from the news and ratted me out. Our creative audio journey together. That was all I could think about. I went to the bus station and bought a ticket as far away from everything I'd ever known as I could get. It took 5 days to reach the end of the line, and then I started hitching. The drivers, they liked to talk. One guy, audio journey together, who smelled worse than I did after a week in the same clothes, told me about a place that was hiring if I was looking. It's a no questions asked kind of place. He told me, puffing on a cigarette and keeping the window cracked to flick out the ash. I was shivering cold, teeth chattering like a pair of castanets. "Essa sounds like my kind of place," I managed. "How much further?" "Well," he said, pausing to light another smoke, "you gotta keep heading north till you hit the Arctic Circle, and then some, past a town folks like me still call Barrow. audio journey together. There ain't no signs for this place, but it's as good a hideout as any for a man on the run. He gave me a wink. I shivered again, and this time it wasn't just from the cold. I hadn't told this guy about my screw up, hadn't breathed a word of it to anyone. He dropped me off at a crossroads, creative audio journey together, a gas station, a diner, and a motel, all huddled together like they were trying to stay warm. The cold had seeped into my bones by then, and I wasn't sure I'd ever feel warm again. I checked in the motel. It was only early afternoon, but the sun was already packing it in. The further north I'd gone, the shorter the days had become. That day had been a blink, and now darkness was swallowing up the distance outside my window. When I'd checked in, using a fake name and paying with almost the last of my cash, audio journey together, I'd mentioned to the motel clerk that I was hoping to head up to that place north of Barrow that was hiring. He'd given me this look, like a mix of disgust and pity, but hadn't said anything. The next morning, I was about to head over to the diner for what might be my last meal for a while, begin our creative audio journey together, considering my broke-ass situation, when the clerk said, "There's a big fella in the diner, shoveling down a mountain of grits. Works at the place you're looking for, if that's really the road you want to go down." A smart man would have heard alarm bells ringing right then, audio journey gear. I just thanked him and strolled across to the diner. The light and warmth inside were a welcome relief, and the smell of coffee was a lifeline. Most of the tables were empty, but I headed for one that was already taken. Now, our creative audio journey together, calling someone a big fella up here was like calling a biker, that guy in the leather jacket. But I was pretty sure I'd found my man. He had to be close to 7 feet tall. His face looked like it had seen a lifetime of hard knocks. He was bald as an egg, and he had a single, crimson teardrop tattooed under his left eye. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. He nodded and kept on shoveling down his breakfast. I cut straight to the chase and told him what I was after. After he'd finished eating, he said, "You got that look about you, like a man who needs a place to lay low while trouble blows over." Made me vow to steer clear of any poker games for a while. A few minutes with me was clearly all it took to read me like a book. "So, I won't try to talk you out of it on," the big fella went on. "I'm the foreman at the warehouse. If you want a job, I'm willing to give you a shot. You can ride out with me." "Mighty grateful," I said, and followed him out to his truck. He moved with this easy grace that didn't seem right for a guy his size, and he didn't seem to notice the cold at all. A few minutes in the wind, our creative audio journey together, which had picked up while we were inside, was enough to make me feel like throwing up. My hands were shaking so bad trying to buckle my seatbelt that I gave up. The big fella grinned when he saw her. "There's an old fur-lined coat in the office at the warehouse, at our Creo journey together. If it hasn't walked off on account of all the fleas, you can borrow it." I smiled, but my face muscles were so frozen it probably looked more like a grimace. The big fella kept grinning, started the engine, and we were off. We drove through the darkness. There was a brief spell of daylight, audio journey together, and the landscape it showed was just blank, nothing but snow. Then it was dark again, and the big fella flipped on the high beams. After hours of driving, lights appeared in the distance. As we got closer, I saw they were coming from a building. It was huge. The lights were set in the ground and ran the whole length of the building, as far as I could tell. There was nothing cozy or welcoming about it. We rattled to a stop in front of the building, and the big fella turned to me. "Follow me," he said. I reluctantly got out of the truck. The whinny jerther and had died down, and there was this stillness that was kind of captivating. The air was like ice. It felt like it was biting right into my skin. No time to be standing around. I hurried after the big fella as fast as I could. He was punching a code into a keypad by a door. "Let's begin our creative audio journey together." And I didn't want to get left outside. The door opened, he let me pass, then pulled it shut behind us. We were in a big open space that ran about 3/4 of the length of the building, I guessed. Stacks of containers were scattered here and there. There was nobody else around. creative audio journey together, and as I kept up with the big fella, our footsteps were the only sound. At the end of the open space, we came to a wall. He punched in another code by another door and went through. There were a bunch of small rooms on either side of a narrow hallway. "That's my office," the big fella said. I'm pointing at one of the doors. There was a window looking out onto the hall, and I could see a desk, a chair, some folders, books, and drawers. No computer or anything like that. A whiteboard was covered in writing, divided into columns by hand, drawn lines. I was about to ask what exactly they did at this warehouse, but then I remembered what that first guy had told me. It's a no questions asked kind of place. And the big fella hadn't asked my name. Hadn't asked for a social security number. Nothing. Audio journey together. I figured I needed to return the favor if I wanted to work here. Didn't stop me from wondering though, and it hit me right away that something shady had to be going on. We reached a small room with a fold-up bed and a couple of bare shelves. "You'll be sleeping here," the big fella said. "Try to get some shut-eye. You're pulling 12-hour shifts, and the first one starts in under 6. I'll leave that coat outside." With that, he headed off. I lay down on the bed and didn't think I'd get a wink of sleep. My mind was racing. Creative audio journey together, trying to figure out what kind of illegal stuff was going down here. Was I at some kind of drug distribution hub? Or maybe they dealt in illegal weapons. Or chemicals, the kind that definitely weren't FDA approved. Whatever it was, the location meant there'd be no prying eyes. It felt to me, though, like the warehouse was locked up for the winter. Come spring, the network would reopen. But for now, the building was still, swallowed up by a wilderness beyond which a different world existed. One of bustling cities and the internet, of Friday night drinks and shopping malls. Our creative audio journey together, one which was just a memory. Arise and shine, boy. Voice said. I opened my eyes. Guess I'd drifted off after all. The guy standing over me looked to be in his 40s. He was wearing a long coat that went all the way down to his calves. His hair was completely gray. A thick scar ran down one of his cheeks. As with the big fella's tear tattoo. No questions, meant I'd never know how he got it. Probably for the best, I figured. Now I had the time to think. I was regretting running away. Before I'd just been facing charges for the damage I'd caused. Now I was in too deep with some major operation. This guy, unlike the big fella, didn't seem like the smiling type. "You gonna move it, boy," he said with a sneer. "I gotta show you the ropes before I get my head down. Come on." He jerked his thumb toward the door. I went along with it. Audio journey together. He took me outside, where he started by showing me the generator, tucked away around the back of the building. "This here's more important than your mama," he told me. "It's hooked up to a control panel inside, where we set the levels for the outside and inside lights. And without it, we got nothing. Except during daylight hours," I chimed in. He gave me a look like I was a prize idiot. "Boy," he said, "we're in the polar night now. The sun set for the last time for 2 months. It's gonna be dark 24 hours a day for the next 67 days. I wrapped my arms around myself. I was mighty thankful for that. The big fella had left me. It was old and filthy, but it was fur-lined and had taken the edge off the cold when I first stepped outside. But now, audio journey together. Hearing what scarred cheek, that's what I'd started calling him in my head, had just said. The coat didn't seem so warm anymore. No way could I handle 2 months of darkness. I wanted to go home. Scar Cheek either didn't notice my growing misery or just didn't give a damn. And because he started listing off a bunch of daily maintenance checks I'd have to do. Then he said, "And when the road's clear again, we..." "What?" I blurted out, again with the Uramorn look. "We're not going anywhere until the sun comes back up in January," he said. Audio journey together. He kept on giving me instructions, but I wasn't listening anymore. By the time he left me to start my shift, I was feeling as bleak as the landscape around me. I went through my checklist without really paying attention. One of my tasks was to do a manual check of all the outside lights, audio journey together. I stepped outside and was met with the glare. They showed the side of the building in all its grimness and reached out for dozens of feet across the empty, snow-covered ground, lighting up nothing. I started trudging around the building. I tried walking with the wind at my back at first, our creative audio journey together, but I gave up on that pretty quick. My face kept getting blasted no matter which way I turned. It was brutal. After what felt like an eternity of this audio journey together, I was almost done with my circuit of the building and was getting up the nerve to take a hand out of my pocket to punch in the door code when I thought I saw something move, way out in the distance. Was there something out there, skirting the edge of the lights? Yeah. Together, I caught a glimpse of a silhouette, a shape moving fast on all fours. Must have been a wolf, I guessed. Or maybe a bear. I had no idea what kind of critters lived in this godforsaken wasteland. Mean ones, I decided, and not ones I wanted to meet up close, journey together. I turned to the keypad and punched in the code, fast. Back inside, I was working through the rest of the list when the big fella walked up. I noticed he had a holster on his belt and wondered why anyone would be carrying out here. But, like always, no questions won the day. He smiled at me and said, "Glad to see you're doing such a great job." "Yeah," I said glumly. "Though I wish you'd told me I was going to be stuck here for months." He smiled. "You'll make a good wage while you're here," he said. "And with no way to talk to the outside world, creative audio journey together, there won't be anyone bothering you. I'd have thought that suited you just fine." I replied, "Living the dream, the three of us. And whatever that thing was I saw outside." The smile stayed on his face, but there was a harder edge to his expression when he said, "Begin audio journey together. They're a creature that's local to these parts. I've only ever seen them from far off, but even so, I'd say they're ugly stow bees. They hide from the light and like the dark. Now that there's no natural light cause of the polar night, they're free to roam around out there." I really didn't like the sound of that. So much so that I ditched the no questions thing. "Are they dangerous?" I asked. "Not as dangerous as one of these," the big fella said, patting his holster. "And now that the polar night's here, you should be properly equipped. Come with me, and I'll get you set up." "Thanks," I said quietly, not feeling very thankful at all. A while later, my shift over, I trudged back to my sleeping quarters. I passed Scarred Cheek, who was just starting his audio journey together. "You should have warned me about those things," I muttered. He sneered at me. "They won't come near you while the lights are on, and if there's a problem now, well, you can just draw an aim. They're critters and we're men. We're the alphas. You got that?" "Boy." I glared at him but didn't say anything. He laughed to himself and added, "No, me and my best friends are going to check on the generator." He swept back the sides of his long coat, like some gunslinger in an old western, and I saw he had 2 holsters on his belt. Then he walked off. Our creative audio journey together, I was ticked off at the big fella, and I was really starting to hate Scarred Cheek. And it was only day 1 of the polar night. I managed maybe an hour's sleep total, and felt like a zombie when I started my second shift. I began with the outside lights. Begin our creative audio journey together. Each one was glowing reassuringly as I walked past until I got to the last one, which was flickering. I tried to remember what Scar Cheek had told me to do if this happened. Drew a complete blank. He must have covered it while I was feeling sorry for myself and not paying attention. Audio journey together. I tapped the light's casing with my knuckle and told it not to disrespect me. "I'm the alpha boy," I said. Somehow, my tapping had done the trick, and the light went back to shining steady. Laughing at how pathetic I was, I decided to go find the big fella and tell him what had happened. Audio journey together. Maybe there was a problem that needed a real fix. I headed for the door and was just about to punch in the code when that faulty light flickered again, and then went out completely. Then the one next to it did the same. "Damn," I said. And then I just stood there, mouth open, as one by one, all the lights I could see died, leaving me in the dark. And I wasn't alone. There was something moving out there. One of those creatures. I was sure of it. Unless it's just my imagination, I told myself to focus. All I had to do was enter the code, then I could get inside. Find the big fella and Scar, Cheek, and one of them would know what to do. Only I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I'd have to do this by feel. No problem, I told myself, and pressed what I thought were the right keys. Nothing, I swore under my breath. Turned around. I'd heard a new sound. Snow crunching underfoot. Under paw, I corrected myself, which really didn't help. I turned back to the keypad. I was shivering like crazy now, and working blind. I pressed again. 5 numbers, then the hash key. Wrong again. I cursed. Draw your knee together, son of a bitch. I tried to enter the code a 3rd time. The sounds behind me were getting louder. There was no denying it now. No blaming it on the wind or my imagination. There was something moving in the darkness, and it was coming right for me. I put my fingertips on the keys. 40 journey together, they were cold metal. The cold, it felt like they were burning my skin. I ran my finger along the keys, ignoring the pain, counting out where I was, and one by one, pressed the numbers, ending with the hash key. There was a click. I turned the handle, and the door opened. I let out a breath, stepped inside, smiled. The lights were still on in here. I started to run, started to shout. The lights went out outside. The big fella was the first to appear. Slow down, he said. What's this about the lights? Flickered, I gasped. Went out, then back on, then nothing. Audio journey together. It's all dark. I hadn't seen Scar Cheek come out of his sleeping quarters, but there he was. What did you do, boy, you idiot? He snapped. Nothing. I protested. He just went off, one by one. The big fella held up his hands. Easy there, he said. It's probably just a glitch. Something that can be easily fixed. I nodded. That sounded good. Problem solved. Then I remembered. There was something out there, I said. It was coming towards me. Yes, the creatures, the big fella said. Let's not worry about them. They'll keep to the darkness outside, and let's begin our cryo journey together, and they won't try to come in here while the inside lights are on. He smiled his usual smile, and I started to feel a little better. Then he added, and of course, since the doors are closed, they can't get in anyway. I stopped feeling better, started panicking again. I tried to remember. Had I closed the door behind me? I swore. What is it, boy? Scar Cheek asked, his eyes narrowed. I think I left the door open, I replied. You worthless piece of junk. Scar Cheek spat the words out, then flipped back his coat, and quick as lightning drew his guns. I got this, he said, and started walking towards the door I'd left open. You go with him, the big fella said to me. Give him backup. I'll be along in a minute. Then he ran towards his office. I did the last thing I wanted to do. I headed back towards the open door and the things waiting in the darkness. I got there to find Scar Cheek standing in front of the open door, both of his guns blazing. He was firing out into the darkness and loving it. We have, he cried when he ran out of ammo, then reloaded your journey, then reloaded, let rip up again. I wanted to cover my eyes. I wanted him to stop, but he wouldn't have listened to me anyway. Thankfully, the big fella caught up to us. That's enough, he yelled when Scar Cheek had emptied his guns again. Scar Cheek scowled but didn't argue. The big fella had brought a flashlight with him, and he moved towards the open door and turned it on. A powerful beam cut through the darkness outside, revealing a gruesome scene. Bodies lay scattered across the ground, their blood staining the snow. Let's begin our creative audio journey together. I realized then that these things weren't wolves or bears, or any animal I'd ever seen before. Their bodies were about 6 feet long, and they were hairless. Their skin was pale, almost white, but crisscrossed with darker veins that stood out. I could see the outline of their ribs, too, together in the sharp angles of their shoulder blades. They had paws, but no ears or tails. From the way they'd fallen, I couldn't see their faces, and there were more of them out there, still very much alive. Could make out dark, restless shapes, keeping just out of reach of the flashlight beam. You killed them, I whispered, horrified. Sure did, boy, Scar Cheek replied. That's what you get for hanging around these parts. Then he turned to the big fella and said, "Ain't that right?" Instead of agreeing, the big fella sighed and said, "You hot head. You've gone and shut up my truck too. The engine's got a hole in it, and it'll take a lot of work to fix." Then he sighed again and closed the door. My shoulders slumped in relief, and I managed a small smile. At least now the door was closed. Audio journey to there was no way for those things to get in, even if the inside lights failed too. "Let's go see what the problem is," the big fella said, and I was happy to follow him. The control panel was on a wall at the far end of the main open space, just before the smaller room started. It was covered in dozens of switches and dials. The big fella studied it, then frowned. "It's a connection issue," he said. "Most likely, the cables come loose." I jumped in hopeful, "But we can fix it." "We sure can," he answered. "Once the connection's back, all you gotta do to make the lights come back on is flip this here switch." He put his hand on a red lever in the center of the panel. "It's real simple." "Great," I said. "So, where's the loose cable?" "Outside," he replied. My guts clenched, and suddenly my mouth was so dry I couldn't swallow. When I said, "What?" it came out so quiet either of them heard. They were already busy anyway. Scar Cheek was reloading, and the big fellow was getting out 2 more flashlights and holding them out. I wanted to protest, to say, "Let's begin our creative audio journey together. There's no way I'm going out there again," but meekly took one of the flashlights from him. Once again, I must have been broadcasting my feelings. The big fellow looked down at me, looked me right in the eye, and said, "Has anyone ever told you that you have a negative attitude?" Scar Cheek chuckled at that. I had no reply, and I trailed after them as they headed back to the door that had been safely closed just 15 minutes before. It opened silently, and, holding their flashlights in front of them, they stepped out. I followed. The first thing I did was almost trip over one of the dead creatures. I steadied myself. "Move in circles as you walk, pointing your flashlight forwards," the big fella told me. "That way. Those things will keep their distance." "Huh. Huh," I replied and spun slowly around in a circle. The beam of my flashlight picked out more of the creatures, and they flinched and moved back, too quick for me to see more than a pale limb. I kept circling and moved forwards as I did. The light kept them at bay. The mouth of one was lit up for a second, and I saw its teeth, bared, then it slipped back into the darkness. We made our way slowly, tortuously slow, to me towards the cables and the generator. "You two give me cover," the big fella said, and as Scar jarred Cheek and I created crisscrossing barriers of light, he got to work. After 10 minutes or so, he grunted. "I think that's fixed it," he said. "Now let's get back inside." We started to retreat towards the door. "Not far now," I said, and then I stumbled. Fell, our creative audio journey thither. I landed right on the corpse I'd tripped over. My flashlight hit the ground, the beam pointing uselessly upwards. The beams of the others' flashlights hit me in the eyes. They'd seen what had happened, and they both cursed at me. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry." The corpse was still warm, its skin hard where my hands touched it as I tried to push myself up, until I felt something tug at my leg. Then a shot rang out, close and loud. I flinched but managed to grab my flashlight and swing it towards my leg, where I saw one of the creatures. The top of its skull was split open, audio journey together, and it was covered in blood. It twitched, then went still. I felt something pulling at my collar, looked up. It was the big fella, pulling me to my feet with one hand. In his other hand, he held the gun he'd used to kill the thing before it could bite me. Next to him, Scar Cheek was moving his flashlight in a rapid circle, encompassing the 3 of us. A solid wall of shadowy figures surrounded us, held back only by the light I knew. "Jet back to back. We rotate together," the big fella said. I did as I was told, and we started moving again, RDAO journey together, just a few feet to the door in safety. The big fella entered the code, and I saw the light inside as he opened the door. I followed him in. Scar Cheek lingered. The big fella hissed at him. "What are you doing?" "One more for luck," he said and drew his gun. I saw one of the dark shapes fall. Scar, Credo journey together. Cheek grinned and lowered his flashlight as he turned to step inside. Then his body went stiff, his eyes rolled up, and his knees buckled. He fell face first onto the ground, and I saw the bloody gash that ran down his back. I saw claws, razor sharp, dripping blood. Then the creature scurrying away from the light of my flashlight. We have to help him, I yelled and lurched towards Scarred Cheek. Leave him, you fool, the big fella shouted. He's dead. We need to get this door closed. We can't just leave him, I yelled back. No. The big fella screamed the word at me, and I stumbled back through the open door just as the inside lights flickered, then died. It was dark inside now, too. You didn't fix it, you made it worse, I cried out. Go to hell, the big fella screamed. I turned my flashlight towards him. Saw he was trying to close the door, but he couldn't, because the creatures were coming in. I scrambled backwards. My flashlight beam danced on the floor as my hand trembled. I swung it back up, towards the big fella. The creatures jumping at him were easily reaching his throat. Big as he was, their claws were slashing at him. Blood spurted out. My flashlight beam made them break away, and I hurried towards the big fella. He was staggering, holding his right hand to his wounds. Blood was flowing between his fingers. With his other hand, he pointed his flashlight beam at the open door, keeping more of the creatures from coming in. I realized. I started to swing my flashlight in a circle. The switch, I said. Will it still work? He looked at me and tried to speak. Blood bubbled up in his mouth, then spilled out. His legs buckled, and he fell. I stood there, helpless, and looked down at him. My hand was shaking so bad, the flashlight beam was jerking around like crazy. I forced myself to hold it steady and started moving it in a circle again. I saw teeth bared, claws raised, audio journey together in the arched backs of the creatures as they closed in. I saw them in glimpses, in moments as the beam passed over them. They were 10 feet away, 8. I couldn't keep them all at bay. In seconds, they'd be on me, and I'd be dead, torn to shreds. I turned and ran. The beam bounced across the floor as I raced towards the control panel. Behind me, I could hear them run me, gaining on me. But I couldn't look back. I couldn't stop. I ran. I was gasping for breath. Sweat was flying off me, and I ran. I ran for my life. I threw myself at the control panel and, guided by the flashlight, found the switch. If it worked, I had a chance. If it didn't, I was history. These thoughts raced through my head as I grabbed the switch and pulled it down. The lights flickered, then burst into life. Audio journey tether. I turned to look back at the creatures. They were everywhere. Hundreds of them, crouched on all fours throughout the warehouse. Their eyes were red, and I realized helplessly, exposed to the bright light, since they had no eyelids. Begin our creative audio journey together. Their snouts were long and as pale as the rest of their hideous bodies. And everywhere, those veins stood out. In the ones closest to me, I swear I could see the blood pulsing in them. They bared their teeth, reared up. They were raging now at an enemy they couldn't beat, the light. And they rushed from the warehouse, scrambling over each other to get out. I waited until the last one was gone, then made my way back to the open door and stepped outside. I could see the lights around the outside of the building were working again. Audio journey together, and the creatures that had come so close to killing me were almost out of sight. That was 2 weeks ago. It's December the 2nd, and I walk through the deserted warehouse, the light illuminating my every step, and all I have left to do is think. The polar night ends on January 23rd. The sun will rise. There are still 51 days to go until then. Outside, the darkness waits. The days bleed into each other. One long, continuous night. I keep the lights on always. I check the generator religiously. Let's begin our Creo journey together. I've rigged up a system where I can unlock the main door from the inside, a precaution against any more surprises. I even dragged the big fella's truck inside, piece by piece. Took me days, but I managed to fix the engine. I found a calendar in the big fella's office. Party journey together. I mark off each day, counting down to January 23rd. It's the only thing that keeps me sane. That and the hope that I might actually make it out of here. I think of Sarah sometimes, but the thought of her is like a dull ache, a reminder of the life I threw away. Sometimes, together, when the silence gets too loud, I talk to myself. I tell myself stories. I ramble on about anything and everything. It's better than listening to the wind howl outside, or the occasional, unsettling, scrabbling sounds that still come from beyond the door. I've gotten used to the quiet, though. Used to the solitude. It's a different kind of loneliness than I was used to back home. There, I was surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. Here, I'm physically alone, but there's a strange sense of peace in it. A clarity, maybe, gurney together. I found a stash of food in one of the storage rooms, canned goods mostly. Enough to last me until the sun comes back. I eat sparingly, rationing it out. I've lost weight. My clothes hang off me. My reflection in the shiny metal of the control panel is a gaunt, hollow-eyed stranger. Audio journey together. I spend most of my time in the main area, near the control panel. I sleep in the big fella's office, on the floor. I don't use the bed in the small room anymore. Too many memories there. I keep the big fella's gun close. And scar chicks too. Though I doubt I'd ever use them. Not after last time. Not unless I absolutely have to. The two men are still where they fell. Frozen, just like the creatures outside. I should probably bury them, but the ground outside is hard as rock. Besides, in a strange way, having them there is not so bad. I keep the flashlights charged. All three of them. They're my lifeline. My connection to the world outside this metal box. Sometimes, I stand by the door and just listen. I imagine the creatures out there waiting. Waiting for the lights to fail. Waiting for the darkness to return. But the lights won't fail. I won't let them. I've become a creature of routine. Check the generator for lights. Check the door. Eat. Sleep. Repeat. The routine keeps me going. Keeps me focused. Keeps the fear at bay. But the fear is always there. Lurking in the shadows. A constant companion. 50 days. 40. 30. The days crawl by. Each one a testament to my will to survive. 20. 10. 5. The final day arrives. January 23rd. I wake up early before my usual time. I can't sleep. I'm too anxious, too excited, too scared. I go through my routine. Check the generator. Check the lights. Check the door. Everything is in order. I stand by the control panel, my hand hovering over the red switch. The switch that controls the outside lights. I look at the calendar. January 23rd. The day the sun is supposed to rise again. I take a deep breath. I flip the switch. The outside lights go out. For a moment there's only darkness, a darkness so complete, it feels like I could reach out and touch it. Then slowly, a faint glow appears on the horizon. A sliver of light, breaking through the darkness. The sun. It's rising. I step outside. The air is still cold, but it doesn't bite as hard. The wind is gentle. The creatures are gone, vanished with the darkness. I stand there, under the pale light of the rising sun, and I feel nothing. No joy. No relief. Just emptiness. I've survived. I've made it through the polar night. But at what cost? I look back at the warehouse, a dark, hulking shape against the brightening sky. My prison. My sanctuary. I turn away and start walking. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'll do. All I know is that I'm alive. And for now, that's enough. I start to walk towards the nearest town. Barrow. It will be a long journey. I am not even sure I will make it. But I have to try. I have to find out if I can still be a part of the world I left behind. If I can ever forgive myself for what I have done. If I can ever be forgiven. It has been a long, cold winter, but I am ready for spring. Arnie together. Alright, so, picture this me, a total nature freak, used to spend every waking moment outdoors. Camping, hiking, hunting, fishing, you name it. I was there, soaking up the peace and quiet like a sponge. My girlfriend at the time, Sarah, was the same way. We bonded over our shared mother nature, and honestly, it was the best. But now, The thought of stepping foot in the woods makes me want to puke. I still hear that thing in my dreams. Its voice is like nails on a chalkboard, but like 1,000 times worse. Let's begin our audio journey together. It all started with this weekend trip we planned to the Mogollon Rim in Arizona. It was me, Sarah, my buddy Mark and his wife, Lisa, and my sister, Emily, with her boyfriend Alex. Emily and Alex weren't exactly the roughing it type, so we all chipped in and got this bogey cabin in the middle of nowhere, right near a lake. The day of the drive, we piled into my SUV and started the long-ass trek up into the mountains. Seemed like we drove for days. Finally, we found the turn-off. Already journeyed together. Some barely, their dirt road that the cabin owner, some dude named Ernest, had told us about. Another hour on that bumpy road, and we were deep in the woods, pulling up to this cabin that was way fancier than I expected. Our Creative journey together. I tried to hide my disappointment. I was hoping for something a little more rustic, you know. No electricity or running water would have been awesome. But Emily and Alex were stoked, and everyone else seemed pretty happy, so I figured, what the hell, begin our creative audio journey together. I'll enjoy this little slice of luxury in the wilderness. When would I ever get to do this again? We lugged all our stuff inside, found the key exactly where Ernest's text said it would be, and then we saw another notey. Septic tank got emptied a few days ago, and the cabin's been empty since. You'll find gas for the generator in a shed about 5 minutes walk from the cabin. Keep the doors locked and the lights off after 10, or you might attract some unwanted attention. Enjoy your stay. Ernest. I read it out loud, laughing. Indoor toilets powered, the works. No one can say we're roughing it out here, I joked. My sister just rolled her eyes. Classic Emily. Mark and I finished hauling in the gear and grabbed the fishing rods for everyone. Lake's about a 20-minute hike from here. Anyone up for some fishing? Alex and Emily were like, no. Two that were good. But the rest of us made the trek out to the lake. And guess what? It was completely deserted. Got the whole place to ourselves, Mark said, giving me a good-natured shove. Hope the fish are biting. We spent the whole day out there, just chilling, fishing, having a few beers, and having a blast. After a few hours, we gathered up our catch and started the hike back to the cabin. By the time we got back, the sun was setting behind the mountains, just enough light to get us back without any injuries. We noticed the lights were already on. Yes, they got the generator going, Sarah said, smirking. Didn't think they'd even leave the cabin. That night, we fried up the fish we caught, and it was delicious, even if I do say so myself. Even Alex and Emily liked it, which was a shocker. Creative audio journey together. It was already shaping up to be an awesome trip. Everything was smooth sailing for the first 3 days. Everyone was having fun in their own way. Mark, Lisa, Sarah, and I would head out early for hikes or to hang out by the lake. Alex and Emily were content to just chill at the cabin. Every together. Every night we'd kill the lights around 9:45, just like Ernest said, and every morning we'd be up bright early ready for a new adventure. We were having a blast. Every single one of us. Then came the fourth night. We were all beat from a 6-hour hike that day, so we crashed early. Before we went to bed, I reminded Alex and Emily about turning the lights off by 10, to avoid attracting bears and stuff. They rolled their eyes but agreed. I woke up around 2:30 in the morning to this frantic knocking. I started to sit up, but Sarah grabbed my arm hard, and she got her audio together like crazy. Hello. A guy's voice called from the front door. Hey, I'm sorry to bother you all so late. It's just, your light was on, and I'm kind of lost. I'm trying to find my friends at the trailhead. I think I got turned around somewhere. And let's begin our creative audio journey together. Hello. The knocking started up and louder this time. I opened my mouth to say something, but Sarah covered it with her hand, whispering fiercely, "We don't talk to the thing in the woods." I just stared at her, completely freaked out. After a while, the knocking stopped. Let's begin our creative audio journey together. And Sarah seemed to relax a little. That is until we heard this soft tapping on the window of our bedroom. I turned my head to look, but Sarah grabbed my face and kissed me. like, really passionately. The tapping kept going for what felt like forever, and she just kept kissing me, holding my face so I couldn't look at the window. When the tapping finally stopped, she let me go. Her face was pale as a ghost. "Knows we're here now," she whispered. "It won't stop. It's gonna come back." "What is it?" I asked, totally confused. "The thing in the forest." "What is that?" I pressed. She just shook her head and rolled over, like she was going back to sleep. "We need to leave tomorrow," she mumbled. I barely slept the rest of the night. The sound of that guy at the door, his desperation, audio journey together. Sarah's insistence that we ignore him, it all felt so wrong, like I was missing a piece of the puzzle. When I finally dragged myself out of bed the next morning, feeling like I hadn't slept a wink, Lisa and Mark were already up, making coffee. Mark handed me a mug as I stumbled into the kitchen. "You Sarah a scary story last night, or something," she spooked, white as a sheet. "Never seen her like that." I blinked, staring into my coffee up at Mark. He seemed his usual, cheerful self, like nothing weird had happened. Creative audio journey together. "You didn't hear all that knocking last night?" The guy who asked, baffled. Nah, Lisa and I were out like lights. Must have slept well past dawn, too. Man, that hike took a lot out of us. We were thinking of taking it easy today, RSB of audio journey together. Maybe just head out to the lake and spend some time together. I nodded, looking back down at my coffee cup. "Sarah said she wants to go home," I mumbled. "Well, that's no good." Lisa chimed in from behind me. "Just got done talking to her. She said you guys had a bit of a fright last night. That there was a bear or something trying to get in." "Or something," I replied, shaking my head. "Look, I think it's a good idea. We should head back into town, maybe just go home." Mark frowned. "We paid a lot of money to stay here for a week, man. We've only stayed 4 nights. Can we at least stay one more so feels like we gained something? I know you've got the car and all, but I think maybe Sarah just got spooked. We shouldn't rush to leave." I sighed. There was no way I was convincing these two to leave, but maybe Emily and Alex would be more reasonable. No such luck. "Just because your girlfriend had a bad dream doesn't mean we should all pack up and run away," Emily stated flatly, not even looking up from her phone. "We're having a great time out here." When I found Sarah, she was still totally shaken up. Her eyes were fixed on something in the distance, staring deep into the tree line at something that wasn't even there. "Hey," I murmured, making her jump. "Sorry, can we talk?" She turned to face me, her expression serious. "No one wants to leave, do they? They all believe it's nothing. That I'm overreacting to a bear or something." I nodded, and she sighed, sinking down onto one of the chairs on the porch. "I'm not crazy," she said, her voice dark. "I've heard about this thing. My granddad and dad used to tell me stories about the thing in the forest. They told me to never say anything to it. Never acknowledge it or look at it, because if I did, and it recognized me, it would take me away. It would take me away and steal everything about me." She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. The way they told the stories, audio journey together, it was like they had seen something like that happen. She looked at me, tears forming in her eyes. "Remember how I told you my dad died when I was young? That he was mauled by a bear?" I nodded. "He wasn't. That thing got him. It got him and took everything that made my dad himself away. It left only what it didn't need." I just stared at her, stunned. "How do you know that? How can you be sure it wasn't a bear or something?" I pressed. "Because I heard him. The night after the search teams found what was left of him. I heard my dad calling to us. We all did," she whispered. "And my grandpa held me close, and he told me don't talk to the thing in the woods. We need to leave." She repeated it again, like a mantra. "We can't stay here." I sighed, nodding slowly. "How about I get us a motel back in town? It's only a 3-hour drive, our creative journey together, and I can come back for the others tomorrow." She shook her head frantically. "They won't be here tomorrow, don't you see? It's going to take them. They won't listen." Sarah, look, I get what you're saying. You're scared, and it sounds like whatever happened was very traumatic. Let's begin our creative audio journey together. I can take you away from here, but I can't just force the others to leave. 2. She nodded in defeat, her shoulders slumping. I'll stay tonight, me. But I want you to stay with me, and I want you to listen to everything I tell you. I gave her a reassuring nod and took her hand. Together, you have my word. We spent the rest of the day at the cabin. Sarah spent the afternoon reinforcing the bedroom door with planks of wood she found somewhere, which everyone else thought was hilarious. I helped her, doing whatever she asked, and by the time night fell, our room was like a freaking fortress. Don't talk to the thing in the woods, she told everyone before we killed the lights and went to bed. 2:30 a.m. Right on schedule. The door practically exploded with the force of the knocking.
Hello? Please? I need help. Come on.
Artie, you're in there. I knew you're in there. I saw the car outside, please. The whole cabin was shaking. What the fuck? I heard Alex yell. I could hear him stomping towards the door. I went to jump up, to try to stop him, to do something, but Sarah held me down, her grip like iron, shaking her head frantically. Hello? Is someone there? I heard a voice. Please. It was a different voice this time, a woman's. Yeah, I'm coming. How the hell did you people find this place anyway? I heard the door unlock and swing open. You left the light on for me. The food, Alex started to say, but he was cut off by this choked, gurgling sound. Then I heard Emily scream, pure terror. There was a loud crash, like something heavy had slammed into the furniture in the living room. Help me? Oh my Gallix, it got him. Help. Don't run so fast, Emily. I heard Alex's voice, but it was wrong, distorted. I can barely keep up. It was Emily's voice now mocking. What? I think she stopped running, because the next thing I heard was her screaming again. Then, a click and a loud banjee. Mark had brought his hunting rifle. I heard a shriek, inhuman and unearthly. Another bang jang, followed by another shriek. I don't know what the hell you are, but you aren't leaving alive. Another shot. Why not? We could all be friends here. Emily's voice chided. Silly boy, silly boy, Ben. Silly boy. Alex's voice mocked. The gunshot stopped. I heard a grunt and a cry of pain. Then I Mark. Oh my God. A crash. Then an eerie silence fell over the house. Sarah's grip on my shoulder was crushing. I could hear footsteps now, heavy, deliberate. Then, a knock at our door. He-Man, we're ready to go. It was Mark's voice. Another knock. Come on, silly. Emily's voice now. It's early enough for us to get a head start on the day. Lisa chimed in. This thing was using my friends' voices. I felt like I was going to throw up. Sarah was staring at me, her eyes wide and desperate. Sarah, baby girl, audio journey together. Why don't you be a good old ranger and open the door for Daddy A? I've got so many things to show you. The color drained from her face completely. I stared at the door in horror as the voice continued. Daddy doesn't like all this hide and seek. I'm gonna come in. The knocking went from gentle to furious, violent banging. I could see the wood starting to splinter between the planks we'd nailed up. Sarah looked me dead in the eye. We don't talk to the thing in the woods. She murmured, audio journey together. Understand. I nodded, my throat tight. The door exploded inward, and Sarah threw the covers over our heads, shielding us from the brunt of the splintering wood. Then, that awful calm again. I could hear it more clearly now. Every step it took sounded like the creaking of ancient branches. Slow and deliberate. Where are you, baby? Talk to Daddy. The thing called, its voice a grotesque parody of Sarah's father. It was moving deeper into the room. Suddenly, I felt this pressure on the bed. Powerful, spindly, branch-like things wrapped around me. What's this? I journey together. Anything to say. It was Mark's voice again, but twisted, cruel. I felt a sharp, stinging pain in my thigh, and when I glanced down, I saw what looked like a bunch of gnarled branches woven together to form a claw, digging deep into my flesh. Sarah's hand clamped over my mouth. I wanted to scream from the pain there, but I bit down on my tongue hard. I bit down so hard I could taste blood, coppery and metallic. The room was spinning. The pain was excruciating. No crying. No pain. Something raked across my back and my eyes bulged as I felt warmth trickle down my back, then start to cool on the sheet beneath me. Why? That's no fucking fun. It was Alex's voice now, and then I heard something else. It was like a chorus of animal roars, all mixed together: a bear, a mountain lion, a wolf, a deer, a boar. It was a cacophony of beasts, and they were pissed. I heard it slamming into the walls, the shelves, wood splintering, glass shattering. Nothing. Nothing. Many voices cried in unison now, a horrible chorus of the damned. Till, T-O-E. I didn't say a word. The thing in our room was thrashing around, a whirlwind of destruction. It raged for what felt like hours, and I just lay there bleeding. Finally, the noise stopped. Fine, a voice said. One that none of us recognized. Fine. I heard the thing stump away, and then the front door was ripped off its hinges. Ifeiny. I heard it scream from outside. We lay there for a while longer, and I felt myself getting lightheaded. The pain was unbearable. When Sarah finally pulled the covers back, I glanced at the clock. 3:45. Just a little over an hour. That's all it had been. I wanted to laugh, but as soon as the cool air hit my wounds, Arnie together, blacked out. I woke up in the hospital, and apparently I'd been out for over a day. Sarah was sitting in a chair next to my bed, looking exhausted but relieved. She had bandages on her arms and face, covering a bunch of small cuts and scrapes. Audio journey together. She told me that it took every ounce of strength she had, but she managed to drag me to the car and get us to town. She apologized for some bruises on my body that I guess I got during our escape. Said she was sorry she had to be rough. Creative audio journey together. But she was terrified it would come back if she took too long. She told me she went back up to the cabin with the sheriff's deputies that morning to show them what happened. There were no bodies, just some remains and a whole lot of blood. She showed me the pictures she'd taken, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. The cabin was totally wrecked. The floors, the shelves, the furniture, everything was destroyed. It looked like she'd tried to avoid it in the pictures, but I could still see the streaks and stains where my friends had died. It's been 2 years now. I haven't stepped foot in the woods since. Let's begin our audio journey together. No camping, no fishing, no hiking, nothing. Sarah got married. I guess going through something like that really bonds you together. We live in the desert now, far away from any trees. But some nights, I swear I can hear Mark calling for me. Sarah says it's just bad dreams. Audio journey together. That it didn't follow us down from the mountains, but it doesn't really help. So, yeah, that's my story. If this doesn't convince you to stay the hell out of the woods, then I don't know what will. But I'll leave you with one last piece of advice, straight from my wife. Begin our creative art journey together. The bravest woman I know. We don't talk to the thing in the woods. Ever. Because if it hears you, if it sees you, if it knows you're there, it'll come for you. And trust me, you don't want that. You don't want to know what happens when the thing in the woods takes you. Just take my word for it. Stay away.